for those who don't know, the two people involved in this particular stream segment we're going to be watching are the Ellen Historian and Natalie Hunter. Ellen Historian is a guy I don't really know a whole lot about him. However, I do see his tweets sometime on my timeline. Uh, Generally, I don't tend to agree with him. I find a lot of his takes pretty disagreeable, but I don't really know a whole lot about him as a person or as a content creator. So I'm going to kind of withhold judgment on who he is. The other person is Natalie Hunter. Those of you who watch my stream for the Mushoku Tensei stuff, you probably are familiar with her. She's an AniTuber who does a lot of ReZero and Mushoku Tensei content, though she's also done stuff on like Shield Hero and has some response videos that went pretty popular. So the two of them kind of had a little bit of a disagreement online. A lot of people tend to call the Ellen Historian a tourist. I don't know enough about him to say whether or not I agree with that characterization, but based on the things I have seen, I can understand why the accusations are levied. And they, had a brief back and forth on Twitter before deciding to have a conversation on stream. And from what I've been told, the conversation actually went very well. So I'm very curious, and I'm also just curious to hear from the LN historian what his positions are just in general. Because again, all I've ever seen are tweets, and those are not always the best way to get to know somebody. So, and because it's a stream, I'm going to put it on 1.25, so let's see. Just a quick reminder that you're watching the Highlights channel right now. If you want to catch these streams live or want to check out my more high-effort analytical content, consider checking out the main channel linked in the description.
Hello, Natalie?
Yeah, I'm here, babe.
Oh my god, it's my go. I used to watch your videos
audio levels.
way back.
Okay, it seems like the audio levels are
Way
good.
back.
I feel bad for taking the piss out of you now, if you were a fan.
Yeah, so
and I will also say, I do know that Natalie was having some audio issues during this because she is in a hotel room in Cambodia, which is probably not the best place for high-quality audio recording. So I can turn the volume up if you guys need it. Just do let me know in chat. If not, this is probably the best we're going to get.
you say I'm a LARPing ReZero and a Mushoku. Like,
I did not like your takes on Mushoku Tensei.
well, all right, but like, why the ReZero?
I think that being critical, we can go to ReZero later, but your take. Sorry, it's a bit loud here because people are shouting. I'm at a pool in Cambodia. Don't worry about it. But I thought your takes on ReZero were reasonable, but your takes on Mushoku Tensei were. You were being critical of the characters like they were real people instead of criticizing the writing, if you know.
That is actually an issue I do have with a lot of media criticism nowadays, especially among younger people. I don't want to be like the stereotypical, oh, I hate Zoomers and Gen Alpha person, but like a lot of them, I think the social media age has kind of had people conditioned into giving like bite-sized opinions. And one of the things is people do not tend to analyze things as writing, but they analyze the characters as if they were real people, as Natalie just said. For example, like, I think CinemaSins is actually probably a big reason for this, where they will say, well, oh, why the fuck did you do this? That's stupid. Well, sometimes people do stupid things. It's not necessarily a bad thing for a character to do something stupid just because it was the incorrect thing for them to do. And I think that kind of has bled into a lot of different aspects of media criticism, especially with morality. And that is with Mushoku Tensei. That is one of the things. Oh, okay, the volume difference. Okay, I will. Thank you for pointing that out, Alan.
I don't think it's right to say that Mushoku Tensei is immoral or anything like that because the author didn't do anything wrong. He created the character he wanted to create,
Yeah, I mean,
I actually think it's going to go a little deeper than what Natalie is portraying it as. It's not just, oh, this is the character that Rifujin wanted to create. It's not immoral for this character to be immoral. I think it's even deeper. I think the core of Rudy's character arc is that he is in this morally... I don't want to say he's like a morally bad person, but he does do a lot of morally bad things. And the reason for that is that he's dealing with trauma, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and he has this extremely unhealthy relationship with sex because of having spent 20 years using masturbation as a means of escaping from his emotional pain. And it just kind of completely warped everything he thinks about. And so much of his character arc is overcoming that, is developing human connections and developing a healthy relationship with sexuality. And it's not just saying, oh, stop being a degenerate. It's come to an understanding of what sex means to you. And even further than that, it's, understand the ways that sex can be used in a positive way. For example, when he gets married, he uses sex as an act of love with his wives, as opposed to just a way for personal satisfaction. And you can even see in various parts of the story, and these kind of get memed on a bit, but Rudy has actual implications with his actual sex life when he's going through certain emotional things. With example, the impotence arc, that's kind of memed on. It's considered funny, but the idea is he was traumatized after a sexual encounter. He thought that the person he had fallen in love with had left him, and he, had a negative emotional and physical response to the idea of sex after that, and that didn't resolve itself until he healed from that. And no, I'm not familiar with the shell. I may have heard about it. The name sounds familiar, but I don't think I've ever actually played it or really know anything about it.
I never criticized Mushoku Tensei on its writing saying it's bad or stuff like that due to Rudius' actions. I've never said that. I've only really criticized Rudius, and I've also criticized the author because I feel like a lot of his almost fetishes, right, are very prevalent. It's very obvious just from reading it.
You've read Old Dragon's Tale, right? I
Yeah,
think from speaking of you, you read
it
Old Dragon's Tale.
I listened it from you.
Oh, you listened to me? Oh,
yes.
Yeah, a lot of people did. I loved reading that series out, but when you think about Old Dragon's Tale, there was no sexual stuff in that at all.
Yeah,
So
there
it's
wasn't.
not like Rifferton can only write porny stuff,
Yeah, I never really claimed that
he
to
wrote.
be the thing.
No, you didn't, but it seems like you have an opinion of him formed on what Rudius does in the story, and
Okay, before they get too much more into this line of discussion, I do want to say I don't think that Mushoku Tensei was about Rifajine's fetishes so much as I think he really leaned into kind of a general otaku culture. And granted, I'm not familiar a whole lot with otaku culture in Japan itself. I, of course, am not from Japan. You can probably tell by the way I speak that I am not Japanese. And I've also never been to Japan, and I have met some Japanese people, but not extensive experience with the Japanese people. So I'm only familiar with the Western side of otaku culture. But a lot of what the writing of Mushoku Tensei was all about, to me, felt like a nod towards all of that, where he was kind of playing around with a lot of the things within that type of sphere, with the type of media that's been produced and the themes and just the general tropes that are being played around with. Like, just for those who have never read the Mushoku Tensei books, while I do think the anime is a pretty good adaptation, all things considered, it does lose a lot in the narrative style just because the books are from Rudy's POV. He's actually just narrating the story as it goes, and you see more of his thought process and how he just inserts pop culture references over and over and over again, where, the things I point out is like he's got references to rants, he's got references to Bioshock, he's got references to Thomas the fucking Tank Engine. Because his mindset is that of an otaku. That's what he's done for 20 years as a shut-in while hiding from his emotional pain. And so I think a lot of that translates into Mushoku Tensei as a story. And I also do point out that a lot of the things we see that are kind of the traditional Japanese fantasy elements are just because he's interpreting these things through that otaku lens. So it's not that the magic system is actually video gamey, it's that he's so familiar with video games that that's how he interprets it, that's how he processes it, that's how he thinks of it. So that's what I think things have gone. And I do also understand that Mushoku Tensei is kind of an inspirational story. Not inspirational, I should say. A foundational story as far as modern Japanese isekai goes. where he didn't start isekai. You know, that wasn't the first isekai story or anything like that, but it did kind of set the stage for a lot of what isekai would become. But he's still playing on existing tropes and existing ideas. So I think that's kind of what translates over to the story, and I think that's what Ellen Historian is kind of misinterpreting as Rifujine's fetishes.
Someone who has written porn books before, you know, like I know that most of the time you don't actually write about what you're into. You write about things that other people will like.
Okay, I will also give a slight amount of pushback to Natalie here, and again, I aware I'm pausing like every sentence, but so I will say this because I know a bit of Natalie's history because I watch her content. Again, my full disclosure as far as my biases goes, I don't know a whole lot about Ellen Historian. It's just when his takes come across my timeline, I tend to disagree with them. I am familiar with Natalie's content. I've watched her for a while, and we are, I wouldn't say we're friends, but we are friendly, and we talk once in a while. So, again, my biases are kind of, I do kind of tend to be on Natalie's side of things more than Ellen Historian's. However, I do know her history as far as being a writer, or at least the basics of it, where she actually used to write more smutty novels, and that's kind of... I think she also took commissions. I'm not entirely sure about that, but she was writing in a very professional sense, where she was doing it for a paycheck, and she is open about the fact that she's sometimes written things that she wasn't particularly into, or things that would be kind of, you know, a little bit like slop. Not exactly like she didn't phone it in or anything, but she wrote things that are generally meant for crowd appeal more than anything else. And I do understand that when you're creative and you're doing it for money, you have to do things with a financial interest in mind. I am not criticizing that at all. However, Rifujin was not a professional writer when he started writing Mushoku Tensei, because he was doing whatever he was doing at the time, and he was releasing it as a web novel. He was doing it basically as a passion project. Mushoku Tensei then became so successful that it ended up launching his career as a writer. So I do think Mushoku Tensei probably wasn't written with that kind of mass appeal in mind, and I think it was genuinely the story that Rifujin wanted to write. And it's one of the reasons I think it's so well loved today, is that you can tell it was written not to facilitate a paycheck. Which, again, there's nothing wrong with writing for a paycheck if that's what you are doing for a living. But when it's something that somebody genuinely wants to write, it's special in that way. And that's why I think Mushoku Tensei is, where it started out as Rifujin's passion project, and it continued that way.
You know?
I mean, I get, okay,
You
here's
find a market.
the thing is,
He doesn't.
yeah.
No, carry on. Sorry.
Like, my main issue is with the I would say like the adult framing of minors in the book, not because like I'm fine with like loli shit and stuff like that in stories if there's like a reason for it, or like, let me give an example. I'm
There
fine
is
with
in Mushoku Tensei.
what
There is a reason for it. You know, like he's reincarnated as a child. It's, you know,
Mhm.
I personally find it weird when people infantilize teenagers. I'm from a country where the age of consent is 16, right?
Mhm.
And what that means when you live there is that you are seen as someone who might be doing that kind of stuff for people your own age, right? It doesn't mean that older people can molest you or anything. It just means that you're not seen as a child anymore. And so when
Yeah.
Americans are like, it's a literal child,
I
I
mean, but
always,
here's like
when
Rudy
I'm
is
Okay, well, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of nuance that I'm not getting just from the two sentences that Natalie said right there. But I'm from the U.S., where we have variable ages of consent, and in my state, the age of consent is also 16. That being said, I actually think that's a little too low. But we also, in New Jersey, where I live, we have what is known as, and a lot of states have similar, where they're called Romeo and Juliet laws. That, because generally lawmakers understand that the age of consent is not necessarily going to be like the point of them is not to prevent like two teenagers from having sex, because that's not going to be inherently exploitative. It's to prevent older people from exploiting younger people fundamentally, because younger people cannot necessarily give consent to older people depending on what the ages actually are. So like there's a difference between, like, let's say you're in a state where the age of consent is 18, which I think that's probably a good cutoff point for the most part. I wouldn't be opposed to the age of consent across the board being 18. But like we understand there's a difference between a 40-year-old sleeping with a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old sleeping with a 17-year-old. Like we fundamentally understand there's a difference. That's why in my state, in New Jersey, while the age of consent is 16, there's exceptions for when you have a position of power over the person, and also there's a kind of 2-year grace period where the age of consent is lower as long as the partners are within 2 years of one another. I don't remember what the lower end is. I learned about it in high school, what the lower age is, but you know, it's just not been it's never been relevant to me, so I just haven't retained the image. Not image, the information. Sorry. Image is probably made me sound really creepy, but yeah, so the idea is that if you're within 2 years of each other, you know, the age of consent is a little bit lower, but the actual cutoff is kind of going forward. So I do think that is a significant thing where we do understand that teenagers are not the same as full-fledged adults. And looking back as somebody who is not a teenager but once was, teenagers feel like they kind of have the capacity of adults, but they really don't. And I do think it actually is. I can kind of see her point where we shouldn't treat teenagers like they're little tiny children, but at the same time, we shouldn't act like they are fully formed adults who understand kind of what all of that entails and who are capable of making rational decisions about important topics. I mean, even I think it was 2 weeks ago, we were talking about when we were watching the Shoe on Head video about the child dating apps. We mentioned that, you know, some things that teenagers can do, especially in the modern social media days, such as, you know, sharing explicit pictures of themselves, that can get them on to a list that will fuck up their life pretty much forever. And one of the things I was sad about is the fact that somebody who doesn't really have the capacity to think about these implications is having these lifelong consequences for something that is ultimately just a stupid thing they did as a teenager. So, yeah. So, I mean, I do see Natalie's point, but I do think you can kind of look at both sides of things.
This is like 40 though. Like that's the thing. Like he's
Yeah,
put
but
he's put in a
not,
world or a
He's in-
position.
He's in an imaginary situation that cannot really exist.
Yeah, but
So-
that doesn't really take away like the implications of it, because my issue is like he's put in a position where like his like he can, I guess, basically be a fucking, you know, a pedo, right? And it's like there's no really any
He doesn't.
consequences like for it. And
He actually doesn't like do any of the things that he could that would be really fucked up. What he
Okay, I get where Natalie is going with this. Again, I know I am pausing like every sentence, but Mushoku Tensei is kind of one of the things I'm invested in emotionally. One of the things I really like. I'm passionate about it. I think it's a great piece of literature, and I love talking about it. So that's kind of why I'm pausing a lot. I think actually Natalie's going a little too hard defending Rudy here, because I think the whole point is that he is not a bad person, but does bad things early on. He has this really warped view of what is okay and what is not. I think actually instead of a bad person, I should say he's not a malicious person. He might be a bad person, but he's not malicious. He doesn't desire bad things for other people. He just doesn't understand that these things he wants are going to be bad. And a big reason for what his character arc is, at least for the first half of the story, the first 12 books or so, is that he is just overcoming all the damage that he had done for the past. Again, it takes him 20 something years to really become like a responsible person and undo the damage that 20 years of isolation has caused him. And 20 years of just unhealthy coping mechanisms, because he was really at about the lowest you can be without actively wanting people to suffer. So I think it's not that what he did was necessarily okay. It's more that he needed to understand why it wasn't okay and learn from that and grow. And again, another thing I talk about all the time, which the fact that I think it's so obvious is kind of skews my own perspective because nobody else really talks about it to any particular extent. Even Natalie, where I think she understands Mushoku Tensei very, very well. She's made a lot of videos on it, a lot of things talking about it, and it's clear that she's a huge fan as well. That being said, like, one of the things that nobody ever really talks about, including Natalie, is how sexuality is such a key element of Rudy's personality and Rudy's character arc. Everything is sex to him, like, and not in necessarily a bad way. It's just so much of where his mental and emotional and moral state is actually reflected in his sexuality, in his sexual desires, in how he engages sexually with the people around him. Like, again, with the impotence arc, the fact that his sexual trauma was reflected physically in that, and that he had this really negative experience with sex right with Eris after, well, the experience itself was good, but after he opened himself up to her, felt vulnerable for the first time really, and then thought he was abandoned, that really just fucked him up sexually. And it wasn't until he had a loving sexual encounter with somebody who woke up next to him, that's when that actually resolved itself. So again, I think that's a very important thing, and a lot of the pieces kind of fall into place when you take that into consideration.
Does try to do is just form like normal relationships.
Wait, what? He like
But
straight up
because he's
says he
never
wants
had
to
it
groom.
before.
What is it?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. And I'm sure Natalie's going to push back on this, but I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where I kind of understand why the Mushoku Tensei haters keep bringing up the grooming line about Sylvie saying, I'm going to mold her into my perfect woman, because it sounds really, really bad out of context. But then in context, especially in the light novels, I think it's more obvious in the light novels than in the anime, where he talks about, he says that line and then immediately backtracks in, like, literally in the next line. He says, nope, bad thoughts, bad thoughts. So it's one of those things where it was basically an intrusive thought that he rejected immediately, because even in his total gremlin mindset, where he wasn't at his absolute lowest, but he was pretty close to it, even then he realized that would be wrong and corrected himself after he had that idea in his head. And it was one of those things that also kind of got brought back a little bit later when he was in this really emotional state where Sylphie was kind of pouring her heart out to him because she didn't want him to leave for school. And he felt this really the swell of positive emotion towards her because he cared about this girl. He didn't really understand what he was feeling, and he interpreted that as a desire to be with her sexually, and then kind of said, hey, what's going on? His brain got overwhelmed, and he's like, okay, you know what? I am going to kind of pursue this, before he kind of gets snapped out of it by Paul, and he realized, oh shit, I almost did something really bad. And again, the whole idea is that at that point in time, he interprets all of his positive emotions sexually, and he just can't understand any of that. So that is something I think is very important. And it makes sense when you really know kind of what Rudy is as a character. But also, it's just, that line, even without the broader context, he says, I'm going to mold her into my perfect woman, and then immediately backtracks, which I think makes it very clear that it's just an intrusive thought, all things considered. So I don't know why people keep bringing it up, especially Ellen Historian, who has presumably read the Mushoku Tensei light novels. So he should know this. And also, just based on the timeline of Mushoku Tensei, it's very obvious she was not groomed. Like, it would be physically impossible for her to have been groomed, because they were friends for 2 years from 5 to 7 years old. Then they got separated when Rudy was sent off to the Boreas Grey Rats. And then he spent a couple years there. I think he spent 3 years there. And then the teleportation incident happened. And it was like another 5 years before they met up again. At that time, they've both been on their own journeys, and they're both adults. They're adults in the Mushoku Tensei world. They're not adults in our world, because they are 15. 15 is the age majority of Mushoku Tensei. But by that time, they're both adults, legally speaking, and that's when they get into a relationship. So she was not groomed. Okay, yeah, 4 years plus another year kind of rebuilding a relationship. Not even, relationship with Rudy and Sylphie. Yeah, so yeah, thanks for pointing that out. But yeah, it was 5 years before they got together, 4 years before they reunited, because And honestly, I think that also shows that I think the year he spent thinking that Sylphie was Fitz was also kind of important because it showed that they developed a bond independent of Rudy's actual attraction towards her, of his desire to have female companionship. And he was able to develop a genuine friendship with somebody he thought was a boy, even though there was kind of the jokes they did about him questioning his sexuality because he thinks Fitz is basically a femboy. So that was funny. Although I still kind of maintain that Rudy, at various points in his story, he probably would have been into femboys.
That he's been locked in a room since he was 14, you know, and yeah, he comes to this new world, he makes friends, you know, and he has ideas about that. But once he's an adult, he doesn't actually molest any kids or
Well,
do
yeah,
anything.
I mean, he's already benefited from like the entire situation. Like the kids he like quote unquote wanted to groom or were grooming just grew up. That's the thing. Like
But
sure,
he
like
didn't
later
think
on,
it
like with the
was
Ars and Aisha situation, he was like he felt disgusted and like he did reflect on it, but there was no consequences to it. It was just kind of like, okay, I understand what it did back then was bad, but that's kind of it.
Okay, I kind of get what Ellen Historian is saying here, but I also think there doesn't necessarily need to be consequences. Like, I don't think that fiction should necessarily be a moral arbiter, and it shouldn't necessarily be the case that the good gets rewarded and the bad gets punished. So, like, I get that that's a commonality in a lot of fiction. I just don't think it's as necessary as he's making it out to be. Like, I think okay. So honestly, I will say that as much as I am disagreeing with him here, I think I do kind of understand his perspective. And I think that, just like surprisingly, I think he's actually coming from a pretty good place. Like I think he's just wrong. I think he actually does kind of give a shit. He just has I think the wrong conceptions about what fiction is. Did he mention something from Redundancy? I might have been thinking of something else because I haven't read Redundancy yet, but I mean, I was kind of thinking of how he was talking about like the idea of his little sisters when he was kind of put into a protective role over them, and he realized that he didn't have any sexual feelings towards either of them, especially with Aisha when Aisha was actually coming on to him, when Aisha did develop a crush on Rudy. And Rudy kind of realized, like, no, this is not okay. You're my sister. Even when Lilia was kind of pushing for it, where that says some things about Lilia, which, again, I think Lilia is a great character. Anime completely fumbled her, but yeah, like I think that his reactions to Norn and Aisha, the fact that he had this strong familial love for them that was not sexual in any capacity, was actually kind of a big deal, and the fact that he actually was repulsed by the idea of anything sexual with them. So, yeah, but we might be we're definitely thinking of different things. I'm not entirely sure what he was referencing, but it is what it is.
Consequence though, because I made a whole video of this, right? Because there was an article in the Anafeminist, the Den of Vols, about how Rudius doesn't face consequences. But that's not the point of the story. And if you think that someone Eris should go completely mental because he groped her, she wouldn't. She's stronger than him. She's bigger than him. To just hit him and get over it. Sylphie, she's 5. She just boy that I like thought I was a boy when I was 5.
Yeah, so he's just able to get away with it. That's the issue.
I think narrations were well written because that's actually what you do.
I mean, yeah.
Well, okay, so yeah, and I think Ellen Historian's issue here is that he thinks there needs to be consequences. I mean, I think that depending on where, depending on what the story is going for, sometimes it doesn't make sense for there to have actual tangible consequences for things, just like there doesn't always make sense to have actual tangible rewards for doing the right thing. And in fact, a lot of stories that are very poignant and really kind of stick with people are the ones that kind of explore that idea of hey, what about people who are essentially punished for doing the right thing? What about, where doing the right thing puts you in an impossible circumstance? And actually a lot of superheroes media touches on that, where the idea of people trying to help people and it just results in personal problems. Like, even again, you can kind of take your pick of them where the hero's personal life suffers because of their hero actions, where they are absolutely, saving people's lives, but they are making their own life very difficult as a result, and they may not get the recognition or gratitude from wider society or from the people they need it most from. So I think that's, I mean, granted, we're looking at opposite sides of things. I'm talking about the reward for good side of things. He's talking about the consequences for bad side of things. But I mean, again, I don't think there needs to be consequences if the story doesn't call for it. There can be. I think there's definitely a place for literature where essentially they've received this kind of cosmic punishment from the writer as the consequence of doing a bad thing. I just don't think that's what Mushoku Tensei is.
I get like in a character standpoint, like that's how they would react in that
Incredible's such a great
situation.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
he does face consequences.
wait, what?
He's worried that the relationship he's building with these people
You're
won't
you're
work
cu-
out,
you're cutting out.
and but
Hello.
yeah, like, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. But something about
Yeah.
consequences and
I feel like he does face consequences that are appropriate for the story.
Okay, so I do kind of get where Natalie's going with this, but I also want to say I do think a big part of what Mushoku Tensei I think was going for is that Rudy tends to be his own worst critic. He essentially punishes himself for his misdeeds. I mean, and that I think is kind of symbolizes his own emotional and moral growth, where early on in the story. Later on, it's kind of a little bit different once he's kind of become a proper adult. But early on in the story, the big lessons he learns, such as, hey, respect boundaries, hands to myself, that type of thing, tends to come when he actually hurts somebody he cares about and realizes, oh shit, I should not behave this way anymore. I felt really bad when I hurt this person. I don't want to ever hurt them like that again. And then he adjusts his behavior. Like, again, when he pulls down Sylphie's underwear, that's kind of his lesson of, hey, when a hard boundary is set, you have to respect that. And with Eris, when he kind of goes too far after the party, that is when he realizes, hey, I got to keep my hands to myself, when he literally says Lolita good, touching bad, which again, it's a Mimi line, but I also believe that the really outrageous lines of Mushoku Tensei all hide something deeper as far as character work goes. So again, Rudy kind of beating himself up about this, even if the people around him aren't, I think is very important for his character arc.
Like, he worries that the relationships will down, or he worries that.
But these aren't consequences of like.
And she was his first friend.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is a little bit difficult to kind of understand the flow of the conversation just because Natalie is having some audio issues. As she and I mentioned, she is in Cambodia. I believe she said she was in a cheap hotel in Cambodia. So just internet is going to be a little spotty. There's nothing we can really do about that.
Wait, what? Like I'm sorry, but you're like lagging a lot.
In a Huh?
You're lagging a lot.
Am I cutting out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just on the phone, so it might be perfect, but maybe I'll face the consequences.
What were you saying?
But I don't think you can end up on the author. Can you hear me?
I heard something about I can't author.
Yeah, I think what she's trying to say is that the consequences like Rudius faces is appropriate for what his actions does for the story, like the way he's put in. Just and what he wants to do. Like for like Sylphie, he wants to connect with Sylphie and wants to have friends for like the first time. So his consequences for
I don't know who the hell this third guy is. Like I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And he's talking very fast. I have this video on 1.25x just because, again, the pace of regular conversation is going to be a little bit different than the pace of an edited video, like what we usually react to. So, but yeah, he's talking fast.
Like the first action is like a separation between the two, as we see when he gets sent to like the other family in volume 1.
But these aren't
Yeah, but these are.
Rara, these aren't like my issue with this is these aren't consequences for him being like a pedo. What?
Hey, I'm sorry. We cannot hear you. It's like your voice is very cutting out. Sorry.
Yeah, you know what I would right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
sorry.
agree with Frank. What he said.
Yeah, the consequences, like the reason why Paul sends Rudy off to teach Eris is because he has his monologue how he states that he's seen how Rudy acts with Selfie and how weird
Yeah, he
he is,
wants Rudy's to. I
he
mean,
sees
Sophie to grow,
he sees
right?
how dependent Selfie is on Rudy, and because of Rudy's weird action, it causes Paul to send Rudy away to have Selfie not be like groomed by Rudy and become like her own person.
Okay, again, again, it's getting a little difficult just because of the audio difficulties with Natalie's side, and the fact that this Frank guy is talking very quickly. Which, granted, I could probably just slow the video back down to normal speed, but also I don't really want to do that because I'm yapping a lot, and I want to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. I don't want a repeat of last week's fucking 4-hour reaction, but again, I think this is losing me just because I still am stuck on the idea of why are consequences necessary. I'm not sold on Ellen Historian's essentially the premise of his argument. I don't think he's justified the actual premise of consequences need to be there, and he's arguing the therefore, but I'm not sold on the premise of the argument. So I definitely will not be sold on the conclusion. And I'm not sure that Natalie is also disagreeing with the premise. She just kind of has a different opinion on the conclusion. So I'm just kind of sitting here disagreeing with both of them in different ways. Because I don't feel like Rudy faces a significant amount of consequences, but I also don't think he has to. I think it's actually kind of very poignant that he is able to learn and grow and feel bad without facing any consequences. Because he independently realizes, oh, this is bad, and me doing this thing makes me feel bad. So that's what causes him to actually change, not the idea of, hey, people are going to view me negatively if I do this thing, therefore I will change so that I can be viewed more positively. I think it means a lot more that Rudy comes to the conclusions himself.
Yeah, but these aren't
Rudy.
The thing is, Rudy isn't like facing these consequences about this specifically. That's like my issue. So
he's getting separated by his whole. Oh, give me a minute. I'll be back. Wait.
Oh.
Oh,
I realized I completely forgot. I'm going to actually link this in the chat because I should have. So this is going to be a link to this particular VOD. And anyone in the watching in the highlights channel after the fact, I will not be linking to this VOD just because Twitch doesn't store VODs for more than I think a month. So instead I will link to Ellen Historian's Twitch channel and also Natalie's YouTube channel. So that is what I will do in the highlights channel. But for those watching on stream, this is a link to the actual VOD.
Get punished by the story, but only at the level that is appropriate. He gets punished by the story that he worries about his relationship with Sophie deteriorating. His friend.
Relationship with Sophie deteriorating. Yeah,
but
I mean,
it's Sophie.
Yeah, that's true, but
It's Sophie in the way that you think it would. Because it wouldn't. If I was a 5-year-old girl and my friend thought I was a boy, it would probably bother me for a day. I'm not still gonna be bothered by it like 10 years later, you know, and that's how the street treats it. Paul sees.
Yeah, Alan, I think that's basically what I was saying earlier. I think it's important, I think, to my perception of what Rudy is as a character is that it makes it a lot more important. His growth is a lot more significant when he grows and improves and matures because he believes it to be the right thing to do, as opposed to growing in such a way as a reason to avoid consequence. Because there are two different things. There's two reasons that people avoid committing crimes. One is because they view it as a morally wrong thing to do, and the other is because they don't want to face consequences. So, for example, I try to limit how much I speed when I'm driving. And it depends on where exactly I'm driving because, different roads have different expectations, all that kind of stuff. But, the reason that if I am alone on the road and there's nobody for miles, the reason I will avoid speeding excessively, not because I think there's anything wrong with that. If there's nobody around, speeding is not really harmful to anyone except potentially yourself. I do it because I know that if I'm speeding too much and I pass a cop, I'm going to have to pay a fine, and I don't want to do that. That is not fun. I'll get points on my license, my insurance will go up. That is why I avoid that. But the reason I avoid things like murder or stealing is because those are, I mean, yes, the risk of punishment is a factor, but the big factor is the fact that I know that it's wrong and I don't want to do that. I know I will not feel good if I do these things, so that's why I don't do them. And those are two completely different motivators, and the ones I'm most sincere about are the ones that I have moral concerns about, where I do things or I avoid doing certain things because of moral reasons. So I think it's more poignant for Rudy to avoid doing something for moral reasons than for consequence reasons. Although there are, just to be fair, there are ways you can do a story that is kind of where somebody starts out by avoiding certain behavior because of consequences and then eventually learns the moral side of things. That's a story that can exist. I just don't think that's the story Mushoku Tensei is.
What's going on there? And he, you know,
I'm sorry, I can't understand you.
it's writing. It's writing. You know, people are real. It's good writing.
No, I can't understand because you're lagging. You're lagging.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm back.
I'm doing my best. Just got the internet connection up.
Okay, wait. So what were you saying before?
Frank, he knows what he's talking about.
But so what did you mention before?
We were talking about Sophie.
we were talking about.
We were talking about the selfie stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the consequence.
Yeah, I will say that is another thing I do agree with you on, Alan. It's kind of it is interesting. Like you can actually tell that he does actually like Natalie. Like which is actually something that I'm kind of pleasantly surprised by, because again, based on the handful of takes I've seen from LN Historian on Twitter, they don't seem like the kind of people who would have a whole lot of overlap. Because, I mean, LN Historian has had some, and again, I will also acknowledge, on Twitter, you're only able to really give bite-sized opinions, nuances stripped away. He has generally kind of expressed positive emotions towards, like, adaptations, changing character designs to make them a little bit more conservative or, like, you know, show less skin, that kind of thing. He sometimes just kind of, I know he kind of recently crashed out over Lolicon stuff, and he said something kind of stupid. I don't remember exactly because he kind of deleted it before it really spread too far because people were responding to it. I'll just leave it like that. He tends to have these kind of opinions that I know that Natalie disagrees with. So it is interesting that they have that he has this kind of respect, and not just respect, but like kind of that he is a fan of hers, because it just, they seem like they would clash in these specific ways that would usually lead people to not kind of stick around. So it is interesting to me.
On that, because Luis's whole goal in early on is mainly to try to make use of this first life, and in the first part that is getting a friend, being able to connect with someone outside of his house, and being able to have like not be like a shut in need with like friends. We lose that, and so him being separated between Sylphie because of his actions with her and how Paul sees that actions is the consequences of his creepy behavior around Sylphie.
Yeah, but he still like
totally
benefits
agree with you.
massively from this. Like there's like sure, I guess you can argue him being separated is like somewhat of a consequence, but like you could say the same for like Eris as well, but then they all come back like into his like orbit like anyways. So it's
okay, again, I mean, again, I'll just preface this by saying that I still am not sold on the idea that consequences are actually necessary here. I think his internal growth is kind of the more important aspect of things. But oh, I completely lost what I was about to say, but like, yeah, no, I whatever I was about to say completely slipped.
is it like really an actual consequence? I mean,
come back after.
so basically he becomes like, he almost like grooms them, right? And like establishes a relationship with them when they're very young. He gets separated, right? And then like later on they end up in his orbit anyways. I mean, I mean, if you want to call it a consequence, you can. No, I just don't think it's. He loves it. I mean, yeah, I know he loves it.
I agree with Frank. I think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying I was less surprised about the lack of animosity, because you know that is what it is. Again, I think it's very possible to be respectful of somebody you disagree with. I'm actually just surprised that he actually likes her content. Just because, just because you can be respectful towards somebody doesn't mean you have to actually like what they do. For example, I don't tend to follow a whole lot of people that I disagree with because, when I watch videos, I don't want to be riled up, generally speaking. That works really well when I'm making content out of it, but 99% of my YouTube viewership is not for content.
Yeah, he loves those girls, and that's one of the reasons why I don't normally like horror, but I like Mushoku Tensei because he made it kind of make sense that they all accept each other, and there was a reason why it worked. Like, I don't want ReZero to end in a harem.
Yeah.
I want ReZero to end with just Ibra and Emilia, but like, I still get the horror thing in Mushoku Tensei.
I mean, like, I guess, I just, like, only thing I wish was there's, like, more focus on, like, the pedo thing, like, specifically, because Rudius grew tremendously in his character in, like, many different aspects, but I feel like
Oh,
the
the
worst
fight
part
is
of
not
him,
relentless.
which was, like, the pedo aspect, was almost, like, ignored. And
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's just it didn't get a front and center focus. But I do think, again, one of the things I will harp on about, and I will die on this hill, is that sexuality is key to Rudy's character arc. Everything about how Rudy engages with things sexually is reflective of his mental and emotional state. And one of the elements of that granted was kind of in the background, but was still kind of there, is the fact that he developed a number of paraphilias as a result of his, 20 years of gooning, basically, where he, again, it is not just the fact that he was a porn addict and a compulsive masturbator. It's the fact that he used these things as unhealthy coping mechanisms to bury the emotional pain of the sexual trauma he endured at 14 years old. And he did that for 20 years, more than half of his life at that point. So the whole, like that is so ingrained into his personality. And one of the side effects of that is that he kind of became a lot less discerning and less discriminatory as far as what he was willing to be attracted to. And one of those things he developed an attraction to was children, which is obviously not a good thing. And it just showcases that his, his libido has kind of consumed every other part of his brain to the point where he doesn't even realize that the way he thinks and acts and behaves is not okay. And so when he reincarnates and gets this positive attention from a girl, the only way he can really interpret that is through attraction, because he still has that unhealthy sexual mindset. His brain is still kind of just broken in that regard. But he also, let's not forget, in those 20 years that he spent alone and coping with his emotional pain, he probably felt very, very few positive emotions. There were brief glimpses of satisfaction when he would pick up a new hobby. He would realize he has some degree of ability to do that hobby, and then he would throw it away as soon as he saw somebody who was better than him. And the only consistent positive emotion he felt was probably sexual pleasure, where he would kind of crave that dopamine hit that comes with orgasm. And if that's your only source of happiness for 20 years, and it's being used to cover up emotional pain, that's gonna really fuck with your perspective on your own emotional state. So when he's feeling these positive emotions in his new life, he doesn't know how to process them, because in his mind, he kind of associates positive feelings with sexual desire. He doesn't understand what it means to actually care for somebody, or to actually feel something positive for another person that's not sexual. So when Sylphie is this, and Sylphie's whole point is that she's this pure, innocent person who is just like nonstop excessive love. That is her entire personality, is that she is loving, she is loyal. Like, she's the kind of person who, it's hard to not like her. And so when he's dealing with her, who's this really earnest person, and he knows her as a child, where children are even more honest and more open, and when they care about you, they will let you know. He is, kind of getting this unconditional love from her. And it's platonic love at this point because she's too young to actually have real romantic love. But she's expressing all this affection towards him. And he clearly cares about her as well. He has a connection to her because of the bullying. He relates to her and he likes her as well. He is happy to kind of spend time teaching her. And so she's kind of expressing all these positive emotions towards him. He's feeling all these positive emotions towards her, but he can't understand what's even going on there. And then later on, as he matures, as he kind of overcomes his past traumas, as he develops a number of human connections, most of them being platonic. So, he has his kind of mentorship with Ruijerd, where Ruijerd kind of is a guiding force for him, where he's also able to kind of teach some things to Ruijerd. So there's kind of a back and forth going on there. He develops a closeness with Eris. He develops friendships. He engages with people. He slowly starts to lose his unhealthy sexual attractions, including his one towards children. It doesn't go away all at once. It just kind of slowly, it starts to get more healthy about how he expresses his sexuality. He starts realizing, hey, certain things I need to take care of on my own. I don't need to project those onto other people. And in particular, and I'm still annoyed at the anime for not portraying this the same way, but when he rescues the beast children from the slavers, one of the things that happens is they are all kind of clinging to him because he just rescued them. He just healed some of them. He is their savior. He is their protector. And they are clinging to him because he's like the first kind, friendly person they've seen in a long time. And they just got rescued from what they thought was a lifetime of slavery. He started feeling a little bit aroused by it because he still kind of, in a sense, interprets some positive emotions sexually. But then he gets really uncomfortable by that. He realizes, like, wait, why, like, this, my past self would have been feeling great about this point, but now I just feel uncomfortable. This doesn't feel normal. This is not how I'd normally react. So that was him kind of dealing with sexuality and kind of in that crossroads period where it's like, this is not normal. What the fuck? And then as he progresses even further, he eventually realizes that, sexual desire is something he shares with the people that he loves. And that is kind of it. And even at one point, I don't think this was as well explored as it could have been, but he even had an instance where he said, my love for my family is so important that I'm actually going to deny myself sexual pleasure for a while because I care about them and not potentially making them pregnant again, because that could potentially put people at risk. That could be a problem. I'm going to deny myself pleasure out of love. So that's kind of how his arc progresses. I think that is very important. Again, while it is not first and foremost as far as what his character arc shows to the audience or explicitly explains to the audience, I think that's a very important thing that Ellen Historian is missing.
Like, or from Rudius specifically, till like later on where he just like reflects on it. That's it. Wait, what?
Yeah, he wrote it, and that's good writing, I think. Interesting. Like, he knew he was fucked up. And
yes, but
he
there's
never
nothing
hurt
that came
anybody,
of it.
I disagree.
Like, there's like,
he knew it was fucked up, and he got out of it. And I don't really see that to him as to that in the story. Like, I just think that's bad.
wait, what did you say?
Yeah, the audio issues are making it a little
Like,
difficult.
I've read Residency. I know about the issue and all stuff, and I honestly think that was just how Richard wanted to tie up the story. It was not that bad, Like,
Okay, wait. I'm sorry, Natalie, I'm sorry, but like,
it worked out.
I'm attempting to weave what you're trying to, like, the little snippets of conversation we're getting from you into like a coherent sentence.
Like for example, you say 10 words, we hear 3 words.
Yeah.
That's how I was like.
It just
I'm sorry. This is internet connection I'm having to work with. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I will. There is nothing more frustrating when trying to have a conversation than technical issues that you can't actually do anything about. I mean, it's like a while back when I was having issues with the kick stream and it was just cutting out constantly and constantly. until I eventually figured out what was wrong with it and fixed it. Oh, that frustrated me to no end. And with Natalie here, I think, she's in a country across the world. It's probably an internet issue, and there's not exactly anything she can do to make the internet better. So it's probably, as frustrating as it is to listen to and not really be able to understand her, it's probably 10 times as frustrating for her in this moment.
Uh,
No, I mean,
is it me or her mic?
I could
Yeah, her
ask
mic is
something
breaking.
though. Like, yeah,
Wait, can you try to type in a chat or
like, no,
something? Maybe that'll be better.
Yeah,
I don't
honestly,
know.
maybe.
Because it's like
Yeah.
it's very hard to
Yeah.
like, try to type in a chat.
I mean, honestly, if what they were doing, like if her mic was so bad that they couldn't actually communicate, it might actually be worth like having her type something out to him in Discord and he just puts it into a fucking text to speech. Because, I mean, it is. Yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Just.
Can you ask Natalie to switch mics or
Oops,
something?
I
No,
realized-
Natalie, I think it's her internet that's kind of
Yeah, it's not
cooked.
the mic, it's the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah, I mean, I can only do what I've got with this hotel, but it
Oh, wait,
actually seems
it's
to be
good now.
alright.
It's good
Like
now.
connection-wise.
Well, you got better.
Oh, okay. And I'm on my phone, so it's not going to be the best audio quality. But no, I wanted to ask why you got in a fight with Chibi, Brandon Varnell, and Brandon Riley. Tell us the truth about what happened there.
Okay, I will say I don't really know a whole lot about his arguments with those three. Honestly, the only one I even am familiar with as far as who they are is he's talking about Chibi reviews. He's the kind of guy. I agree with a lot of the stuff he says, but also he does seem to be a bit of a shit stirrer. So yeah, I mean I've seen like one of his videos. It was kind of the and I'm going to say this is going to sound derogatory, but I don't mean it that way. He comes across as like the anime equivalent of a slop tuber, where, I mean, and again, that sounds like I'm being insulting and derogatory. I don't mean it that way. But the type of daily, like, commentary content is not my thing. I don't particularly enjoy it just because you kind of have to consistently find things to talk about and extend your talking. It just does not satisfy me in the way that I think more prepared scripted content does. That's just me. And also, if you see any of these creators, where there's a number of them, you can kind of point to any number of the daily commentary channels where a lot of times if you watch more than one video, they kind of say the same thing for about half the video. That's kind of the impression I get of cheaper reviews, where, again, I respect the grind, but it's just not the type of content I'm interested in. And also, he does seem to like to kind of stir up drama when he can. He kind of leans into that type of thing.
Because it seems like some people were saying some other things, and
I mean, the chibi thing goes like pretty far back, but for Brandon, right? Like, okay, so initially it started with Sense to Be Hero.
Which Brandon, Riley or Barnell? Because you were arguing with both of them yesterday, and they're both friends of mine. So
I don't know, I don't remember which one, but the guy who has his
Brandon
face
Barnell's the
as
author, Brandon Riley's the YouTuber.
I think it's the YouTuber. So basically, what happened with the YouTuber Brandon? He I think he quote retweeted me about on the censorship of Sense to Be Hero, where I said the self-censorship of the studio was fine if it did happen. I know it didn't happen. Then he quote retweeted me saying all censorship is bad and it's fiction, right? Then
Okay, so I mean, when it comes to censorship, I am generally anti-censorship. I also believe that, like, in adaptations, if you're going to change something from the original to the adaptation, there should generally be a good reason for it. There are times when that's appropriate, but like just trying to appeal to certain sensibilities is not something I generally like. So, again, I'm not familiar with this instance in particular, but I know it's one of the things when they said self-censorship is okay if it did happen. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, again, the goal of an adaptation should be to bring the creative of one medium, bring their ideas and their hard work and the story that they made, translate that to a different medium, and try to deliver that same fundamental experience to a different audience. That, I believe, is what the goal of adaptation should be. It is not always the case like that, and usually when I have issues with adaptations, it stems from them not doing that. Like a classic example is, and this is one that I've been mad about for like 15, 20 years now, the Aragon movie, where it was pretty clear that the director or the writer of that movie, they had their own story they wanted to write, but they couldn't get it greenlit unless they could basically attach it to an existing IP. And so they created the Aragon movie that is nothing, that kind of destroys everything people liked about the books. And, you know, if there was more, actually, a lot of the stuff in the Aragon movie would have kind of broken future installments, because it just kind of contradicts stuff that happens later on in the book series. Not to say that the book series was perfect. I really liked it, but there were some issues with it. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you're trying to faithfully adapt something and really try to take what people loved about the source material and bring it to a new medium, if you're going to change something, it should be for a genuine reason of, this will make more sense in this other medium, or this will make things better. And I don't think necessarily censoring is usually not going to actually work. Sometimes you kind of have to do it just for, like, if you're doing it on like a TV side of things. Like, one thing that's very common in anime adaptations is that a lot of things will get kind of softened. Like Rudy in Mushoku Tensei, he's a lot less creepy in the anime, as, believe it or not, he's less of a degenerate in the anime. He does less explicitly creepy sexual things. That's because there's a lot of stuff you just can't necessarily show on TV. I understand that, even if I don't necessarily like it. But yeah, I disagree with Ellen Historian on that side of things.
Brought up scenarios, right? Saying, well, just because it's fiction.
I think all censorship is bad.
Wait, what? That all of fiction.
I agree with him. I think all censorship is bad. But
well, I brought up situations where all censorship would be actually, there's some censorship should be good. For example, one would be the AI creation of CSAM, right? And then he brought up, but it's trained on something, right? But then I changed my hypothetical. I'm like, all right, you're right, it's trained on something, but let's say it wasn't. Let's say there was some fictional AI where there was no training data and I was just able to make it. But like, this was a conditional hypothetical, and apparently no one on Twitter knows what a conditional hypothetical means. So they all thought I was defending AI CSAM.
Okay, I mean, that is an interesting question, because, I mean, it kind of stems in, he was clearly kind of talking about the lolicon debate, where, you know, the general argument on the, or I'm not going to say pro-lolicon side, but the non-anti-lolicon side is that, you know, it's fictional. It is, nobody's actually getting hurt. It's just pixels on a screen, ultimately. And that's an argument I generally tend to agree with. Personally, I feel like I'm not going to waste my energy or my time getting upset about something that is just purely fictional, that is not actually hurting anybody. So that's kind of my perspective on things. He clearly disagrees, and that's fine. He's allowed to have his own opinions. And he's kind of translating that argument onto AI-generated stuff, where it's like, what if you could generate AI depictions of CP that are indistinguishable from the real thing? And then he added the caveat of, what if it was not based on existing training data, so that you didn't require actual exploitation to be fed into the machine learning in order to create this new depiction. And I think there's definitely legitimate arguments to make there. I think there is also a perspective on things, because I don't know exactly where every piece of the argument is going to go, but one of the things that I think is a significant thing that a lot of people don't consider is that, is there any, like, even remotely reality level to it? Like, for example, I think it's very, very different to generate an image of a real child versus generating an image of a child that does not exist. I think those are two very, very different things. Even if you believe both are wrong, I think most people can agree that one is more wrong than the other. And that's kind of where also I stand on lolicon stuff, where, again, personally, I'm not going to get upset with somebody drawing pictures of a fictional character. Like, you know, if you're going to, you know, pick an anime lolly and draw Rule 34 of them, I don't really care about that. However, and that's where my issues with Shadman come in, where the various fictional characters he draws, I don't really care about that. But when he drew pictures of actual, like, real children, even though the depictions were purely fictional, that to me is not okay. That is completely unacceptable. And as much as I am an anti-censorship person, that should be illegal. So, like, when he drew, like, I think he drew Keemstar's daughter, and he also drew from Logan, X-23, or... Although, of course, she was played by an actual child. She's not a child anymore, but she was at the time. So, again, that's kind of where my line is. But I also kind of get what he's saying, where when talking about hot topic issues, people fundamentally lack the ability online to comprehend entertaining an argument and playing around with it with hypotheticals without necessarily accepting the argument and agreeing with it. And also, hypotheticals, people tend to kind of ascribe motivation to hypotheticals. While bad faith hypotheticals can exist, it is like a lot of people are done with that. So I fully believe that whatever he wrote and whatever he was saying, people probably did misinterpret it, because especially when it's a hot button issue like the lolicon debate, it's going to get people riled up. People are going to ascribe intent that might not actually be there. So I can completely understand where he's coming from here.
You were just talking about a hypothetical thing, and he took it to be serious and said you thought CSEM was fine or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I only saw bits of that conversation, but like.
And like Chibi
I agree
reviews
with him
and
about censorship. I don't think there should be any censorship. If it's okay in Japan, it should be okay everywhere else. Like we're adults.
Like would you say like pretty realistic arts that is like let's say like a person would not be able to distinguish if this was like a real person or not, and it was like a kid. Like
I mean that is becoming a problem now, but it's not a problem in the anime industry.
Yeah. Okay. And again, they're kind of going to bring it back to anime because that's kind of the topic of the discussion here. But I will say, honestly, the biggest issue with the AI generated stuff is that if it gets to the point where you can't tell if it's real or not, that is where it's going to be a real issue, because people might seek out the AI generated stuff because they don't want to hurt real children, but then they can't tell if they are or are not, and people are going to be able to sneak things through. That kind of opens up a can of worms where whatever my moral and principled position is on the matter, I think we can also acknowledge that there's practical implications for things as well, where even if morally I would be okay with something like this, there might not be any way to actually do it practically, and you might kind of have to take a hardline stance, because unfortunately reality doesn't exist in a perfect hypothetical. There's going to be externalities. It's like, let's talk about economics, for example. Like, a lot of people have different positions on economics. You can be, a capitalist, a socialist, a communist, some kind of mixture of them. There's all sorts of things you can do there. But there's like this thing called the rule of 300, where just about any economic system, if it at least kind of makes sense on paper, it can work in a community of 300 or fewer. However, the more you scale, the more the flaws in each economic system kind of show themselves. And if you, kind of expand to like a global scale, honestly, kind of any economic system is going to have significant flaws. So, and that's because, even if a lot of them make sense on paper, like every major economic system makes sense on paper. But when you actually bring reality into it, it gets messy. Like, things are going to kind of crack and fragment. People are going to subvert the system in various ways. So that's kind of how I feel. I think that general mindset can apply to the AI generated CP side of things. Because again, I think, in a pure hypothetical, it's probably not morally wrong, but actually, like, is there a way to actually allow it and still be safe about it? I don't necessarily think that's the case. Although there's also the argument of what if, and this is like, again, kind of going pure hypothetical theory crafting, basically. What if hypothetically everything was flooded with AI so that it made it like hard to actually find the real thing? That I think would actually possibly be even better, just because there wouldn't be individuals being exploited as much. But again, that's kind of well outside of my area of expertise. So I'm not going to think too hard about that.
Yeah, but I was
know,
bringing up in total because his defense was just
we're
because
looking
it's
at
fiction.
stylized drawings of people that don't exist. We know they're stylized, and if people are into that, I don't really care, you know. But
Yes, but like
what you're saying is a realistic concern. I do agree with you.
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying,
Mm.
but like your argument is different than his. His argument was based on it just being fiction, purely because it's fiction, it shouldn't be censored. But I gave a situation and a few situations where if it is fiction, it can still also be, or it should also be censored, right?
If it's fiction, but it's clearly stylized.
Yeah, okay, that's a different
really see a
different
problem,
argument.
but-
But we
Yeah, and again, I think that's just, it comes down to hypotheticals are great because they allow kind of a clean slate to frame an argument in its purest form, kind of what the, core of your belief system is. Unfortunately, the conclusions you come to in the context of a hypothetical, because the hypothetical is crafted to kind of eliminate any externalities, any kind of extreme what ifs, kind of just to kind of get to the core point that you're making. So that means that when you kind of apply those to the real world, things get messy. And I think that's kind of what's happening in this argument here, where you can have a principled position. When you apply it to reality, things get messy, and it's really hard to reconcile the two.
you can use that as well. My issue with that still, if it's
But
stylized,
do you
is
have
that
a problem with that? Like, if it's stylized,
Yeah,
if there's a lolly in ReZero, do you have a problem with it?
purely just a young character is not an issue, but if it's let's say if it's sexualized, right, without any purpose to it, or like purely just to be like pedo bait, then yes, I think it's morally bad. About like censorship as in like legal censorship, no, I don't think it should be legally censored. But if studios are uncomfortable with like fully animating the author's like original like sexualization of a kid, then I think the studio should be allowed to self-censor themselves, right? And if the authors don't like that,
be allowed to, but not. I don't think it should happen at a later stage. You know.
Yeah, I will also acknowledge that there's a difference between saying something should be disallowed versus saying something should not be done, because those are two very different things. Like, again, like that's like a conversation a lot of people have with a lot of factors where, even if you talk about kind of the fundamentals of things like free speech, one of the common things that is falsely attributed to Voltaire is the quote, "I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." So that is another thing people do have difficulty comprehending, is the idea of saying something should not be done, but that doesn't mean I think it should not be allowed to be done. So that is another layer to this discussion that I think is it complicates things. And unfortunately, when arguments get complicated, a lot of dumb people online tend to kind of roll with it.
Like, if the studio's all right with it, and the character is something we just go, yeah, that's a a fictional person, that they don't exist, it's fine. It's clearly animated. It's not AI generated like deep fakes or anything like that of children. If it's just like Beatrice or something from ReZero, I think, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, Beatrice's example, I don't think she's really ever, like in the anime at least, not ever sexualized, but
Not sexualized even in the world.
like
she's never a loving son, but
yeah, okay. So I've only seen the first 2 seasons of ReZero. I have not read the source material or anything like that. But yeah, I don't remember Beatrice being sexualized in any capacity. Although I have no doubt that there's plenty of Rule 34 out there, because there always is.
she's always dressed in more like OA clothes than anything sex.
oh, you're cutting
But there
out
are
again.
characters in ReZero. There are lolly characters in ReZero that are sexualized.
Yeah,
Never in sex in ReZero. But like there are characters that are sort of dressing P, and yeah, I don't really mind it. I don't care.
Well, I will also acknowledge there's something that I don't know if they're going to actually get onto this particular topic, but there's kind of the meme of the 1,000-year-old dragon, where I think the funny thing about that is, first of all, I think that would actually have legal weight, that argument, which is that alone is just hilarious. But it also does kind of add a question of, does the character's actual canonical age versus their appearance actually matter? Because I mean, for a more grounded example, since we're talking about Mushoku Tensei, we can talk about Roxy, where Roxy is, has physical reasons for looking young, looking like about a 12-year-old girl, even though she is an adult in every other sense of the word, you know, things get a little bit messy there. And it's clearly not done as an excuse to make a childlike character acceptable to be attracted to. It's actually a significant part of the story, and that actually goes deep into her character arc. But the question is, like, you know, is there any moral implications there from the anti-lolicon side of the debate? And I think there's, you know, genuine discussion and debate to be had there. And then if you want to kind of even expand the hypothetical even more, kind of go to the real world, what if you had a woman who, due to a hormonal issue, has the physical appearance of somebody who's like 14 years old, but they're actually 30 years old? Would it be immoral to have sex with her? I think most people would say no. Would it be immoral to be attracted to her? Some people might have questions about that. Again, it's a messy conversation. People like to act like there's easy answers to this, and I don't think there are. But I mean, and again, because the internet is the internet, when there are these messy moral questions, people tend to act like idiots. And I think a lot of people online like to act like idiots and don't like to actually have serious discussion and really consider things in an open-minded way. And that's honestly one of the reasons I think that Mushoku Tensei gets as much hate as it does.
Story, you know?
I mean, the thing with ReZero, I think, like, if the studio, like White Fox, self-censors, like, for example, I know Capella and Liliana are both above like 18, but like the studio censored both of them. I think it was fine. I don't think people should be angry about this. It didn't really change like the story whatsoever. Hello?
They did.
I can't comment on the specific instance because I'm not familiar with it.
So are you saying?
I understand why people thought it might like lead to something worse, but it didn't. Like the season fine.
Wait, hello?
I did get that. Hello?
Yeah, you're cutting, like, I don't.
Yeah.
You're cutting out everything. Like, I can't understand what you're saying. Or something about it getting worse. What getting worse?
I'm trying. I just turned it off and on again. Is that all right?
Yeah, now I can hear you again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah,
his fucking face when she did the nya, that was so funny.
I thought that making a little change to like Liliana's top to make it a bit longer and stuff, it wasn't a big deal. But I can see why people thought it might be a, you know, like an indication that there was something worse going to happen. They were going to, you know, put everybody in a hijab or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think also there's arguments. I mean, I get what he's saying, where Ellen Historian is kind of pointing at, does it matter if it matters less if it doesn't impact the story? Although I do think that depending on the situation, because this is going to be very case by case, it really does depend on, is there a general aesthetic being done here? Is there kind of a, you know, a tone or a type of flair that they're trying to go for? Like, and the reason I'm saying this is because those of you who watch my videos know that I make, or for those on the highlights, my videos on the main channel is what I'm referring to. You know that I've engaged with a lot of eroge, a lot of explicitly sexual games and visual novels. That's kind of one of the areas of discussion that I have. One of the things I like to analyze. A lot of times the sexual nature of those games is a part of the appeal, even without the actual, you know, selling point, where it's not just that there's sex, but the fact that it's kind of sexual and sexy and plays around with those kind of mindsets and is kind of aware of what they are. That is part of the flair of what that show, of what those games are meant to be. So, like, if you look at the 1990s, I think it's 1994 or 1991. I don't remember when exactly the first Rance OVA came out. But it was you know, it's one of those things where it's not like that explicitly sexual. You know, you see it's a little ecchi. There's, you know, there's some boobs and stuff like that. But there's no actual like hardcore sex like there is in the games. And I think that's fine. But the fact that if it lost the sexy nature of it, the kind of goofy sexuality that is present in the Rance games, it would have lost a lot, even if it still maintained the goofy humor and kind of the crazy characters and all this stuff. The fact that it's sexual is part of what it's going for, even if your goal isn't necessarily to jack off to it. So I think that can also be a factor in certain like light novel to anime adaptations, where is it the case that in whatever example they're talking about, I don't know personally, I'm not familiar with it at all, but is the sexuality, is it kind of meant to be part of the experience? Is it supposed to be kind of fun and sexy? If it is, then making it less sexy for the anime adaptation, I think that's wrong, or at least wrong from an artistic point of view. If it doesn't matter either way, then, you know, it is what it is. That, I think, is an important factor that a lot of people don't really consider.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I think that's a kind of
No,
almost a
but that
slippery
didn't
slope
happen.
fallacy, right? Saying, oh, this small change will lead, the small censorship will lead to everything being censored.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think it's gonna be like that.
Okay, I think it matters why the censorship exists. Like, what is the reasoning for it? I think that can betray a lot of what the mindset of the new creatives can be. So, like, and also kind of knowing the reason can also explain how well the creators of the adaptation understand the source material, because that is another important factor. Where Mushoku Tensei, one of the reasons I think the Mushoku Tensei anime is as good as it is because I do feel like, especially as the series has gone on, like from season 1 part 2 onwards, I really felt like the people working on the anime understood Mushoku Tensei as a piece of writing. They understood what it was going for, and that's why so much of what they've translated onto the screen worked as well as it did. And I know also that Rifujin was involved in the anime, so that's probably a factor, but like I think, yeah, understanding and changing something visually, if they're doing it for reasons that are kind of dumb and show that they don't understand the source material, that can be an indicator that of the slippery slope. However, if there's actual practical reasons, or it's just like, hey, I think this design looks better on screen than it does in an illustration, that's completely different. So like if like somebody was kind of adapting, like, say, Bayonetta, and they wanted her to be less sexy or not as, again, you know, Bayonetta's design is meant to be sexually appealing because she's a femme fatale. If they made her less sexy in an adaptation, that would betray that they don't understand the character at all, because, again, she's a femme fatale. Sexuality is a part of her character, and that's a part of how she expresses her confidence and power and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's so context specific, this argument. I don't know how it impacts this particular example because I'm just not familiar with it.
And I don't approve of any censorship. If it's allowed in Japan, we should be allowed to see it.
I mean, there's a lot of things in Japan. Like, I lived in Japan for like half a year, right?
If
And-
that's the story that they wrote,
Yeah.
why can't we see it? What harm is it going to do to me to see, you know, Liliana in a crop top?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Liliana specifically, it's fine. I think Liliana is like 20 something, right? Same with like Capella.
she's
She's
22, I think.
like, how old was Capella? Like, she's over like,
Capella's
18, right?
she's old enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's an adult anyway. But
So-
like with the witches, it's a bit different. But yeah, she's, I think, you know, probably hundreds of years old.
Yeah. So
I think Felt is her niece, but like Felt's only young. But you don't get sexualized stuff with Felt, you know? It is actually specified to be young.
there is a little
You
bit
know.
of sexualization with Felt, especially her
Again,
outfit.
they're talking about a
So,
specific example that
I
I'm
mean-
not familiar with, so I don't have a
would
whole
want
lot
that
to
when I
say
was
here.
15, you know?
I mean, I
She just-
guess.
she's just wearing shorts and a crop top. I would have worn that when I was 15.
I mean, you can like
you know.
barely like. Can you really call it crop top? It's. I mean, I guess it's. It's like the original like arc 1 stuff. It's a little. I don't. I think it's fine. It's not too bad. It's fine. Again, like I have more of a moral issue. I have more of a moral issue with, like, you know, the adult framing of minors anime. Not like I don't want it legally banned, if that's like what people think. So that's why whenever I bring it up, it's usually about like studios deciding to self-censor and people getting mad about that.
Yeah, and again, I will just reiterate that that's an important distinction. There is a difference between saying something shouldn't be done and saying something should be illegal. Like, there's a very clear distinction between those two. It is, I don't think it's acknowledged enough, but it's an important distinction.
So I'm just saying, well,
Yeah.
I think we can, I don't know, obviously most people on Twitter won't agree, but I think most normal people would agree that, like, you know, sexualization or like the adult framing of minors in anime is morally bad, but
No, but like it doesn't matter because it's anime. You know, the voice actors are all adults.
Yeah, sorry, I don't
You
know
know,
if you can hear my
yeah,
cat. She's
but
being
like,
a
We
little
don't
loud.
like cuties that put
it's
actual
representing a
children,
kid
you know.
though.
it just doesn't matter when it's anime. It's all just
Well,
made up bullshit. The people working on it are all adults, so no children are being exploited.
Yeah, again, as I mentioned before, that's kind of where my line is. Is there actual harm being done? That, because, you know, if it's all completely fiction, and yeah, I do agree they're kind of going in circles. Again, this is kind of an impromptu discussion they decided to have after a very brief back and forth, which, like, they didn't even have a real back and forth. It was kind of just they just kind of, I think Natalie kind of fired a broadside against Ellen Historian on Twitter because, you know, Ellen Historian is not the most well-liked person on in this sphere on the internet. But she kind of fired a broadside on him. He invited her onto his stream. They set up a time, and that's kind of how that went. Oh, sorry, I got a cat here. Hey, say something to the stream. You know? No? Okay. You're gonna be loud, but not when you're by the microphone. Okay. So yeah, I got a cat on my desk. She is a little high on catnip. Usually that makes her behave, but today, okay, I'll play it. She's blocking the screen, but it doesn't matter.
I know it's not directly harming any individual children, right? But
It's not
it is,
harming anyone.
yeah. But I do think there are some studies, like especially recently, that are talking about like just the lolly's effect on like society in Japan in general, right? And then like if you look at studies for, I know,
No, but if you
yeah,
look at those studies actually in detail,
yeah,
the main growth has been in psychological damage, and that's just because of the way that they changed the reporting. Actually, sexual abuse of children hasn't gone up.
yeah. I don't think it's,
Yeah, again, I don't know which studies they're particularly referencing, but the ones I saw, and granted, this is a few years old, but the ones I saw have referenced that they get. I don't think anybody's ever been able to really find a strong correlation between lolicon stuff and actual abuse of minors. Granted, there might just need to be more research done, but I don't think they can prove really a correlation in either direction. And I think I know what Natalie is referencing. They mentioned that, you know, around the amount of time that lolicon has increased in Japan, they also mentioned that child abuse has increased. However, it was mostly mental, emotional, psychological abuse, not sexual abuse. Because when people are talking about child abuse in the context of lolicon, they're talking about sexual abuse. And the studies did kind of do that. Yeah. Yeah, the video games cause violence. That was yeah, I'm a 90s kid. I remember when that was the debate. Although I will say, as annoying as it was to hear people talk about how video games are destroying society, all this stuff, it resulted in some really funny things happening because Jack Thompson, he was the one who really pushed the video games cause violence argument. He is batshit insane, and he eventually actually got disbarred because of how batshit insane he is. But like at one point, he actually fucking sent he filed gay porn in the legal system. Like I don't remember the exact contents, but he actually like had a motion that included gay porn as exhibits. So a judge basically looked at his motion and saw gay porn, and that was he was not apparently the judge was not happy about that. And and again, I don't know, Jack Thompson was kind of the guy who, if you didn't already agree with him, he looked like a crazy person. Where like at one point he mentioned the game Bully, which is a hidden gem by Rockstar, which not a lot of people talk about compared to, you know, GTA and Red Dead Redemption. But in Bully, there's the ability to make the main character kiss another boy. Jack Thompson kind of freaked out about that and said, you know, there's gay relationships. Good luck with your PG-13 rating now. And then once the ESRB finds this, and then the ESRB said that, yeah, we were aware of that when we rated the game initially. We're not doing anything to change that. So, yeah, he kind of he's an interesting character. I would recommend, there are YouTube videos about his story. He is so much more crazy than you think he is. But yeah, that's enough of a tangent here.
I mean, I'm not sure on that specific, but when you look at violence in video games and violence in TV shows, I know it doesn't make anyone more violent, but there, like, numerous studies have shown it makes people desensitized and more desensitized
I
to
watch
violence.
nothing but the most violent shit you can imagine, but I've never hurt anyone.
Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can also say there's actually a difference. I mean, you do get desensitized to fictional violence, for sure. Like, I will say the stuff that creeped me out as a kid doesn't bother me anymore. So, like, you know, I'm when it comes to fictional violence and stuff like that, you know, I think absolutely nothing of playing Doom and tearing a demon in half. It is different when it's real violence, though. Like, for me, like, if I watch like an MMA match and see somebody get knocked out, that is so much more viscerally uncomfortable for me than seeing again, like, somebody get blown to pieces or like somebody getting tortured in a Saw movie. It's different when it's real. And I don't know if there's been many studies examining the connection between that, because, again, and honestly, one of the things that's kind of I find very interesting is that real violence is a lot of times a lot less graphic than fictional violence. But real violence is so much more uncomfortable to see. Like, if you've ever seen a video of somebody dying, which, having grown up on the internet, sometimes you get jump scared by it. It's something I've seen. It always kind of shocks me how little blood there is. Like, less blood than you'd think there'd be. But it still disturbs me way more than watching a fictional character die.
I'm a triple black belt.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
but
not
I've
saying
never hurt
that's.
anyone
Yeah, I'm not. I'm legit
outside
saying
of
the
a
opposite.
training environment where you're allowed to, you know. But
I'm not
like-
saying you are. It makes you more violent.
Oh, that's funny, Alan. You're basically saying the same thing as this person right here. It's like, anime lolly's effect on society. What era do we live in? Oh, yeah, it's I don't know. It's funny.
I'm saying it desensitizes people towards violence.
Mm.
So, like,
I don't know if it does.
I mean, like, I could give you, like, I'll just give you real world examples from, like, our life, like, just my observations. Like, you know, the Charlie Kirk assassination, right, and like his killing. A lot of people were very desensitized to that, right? So it is like a lot of
Okay, I get where he's going with this, but I think that is actually an example of something completely different. I think when it comes to politics, and this is one of the reasons I don't discuss my own political opinions on YouTube, is that politics have become, like, very radicalized, especially online, where people will essentially dehumanize their political opponents to such an extent that they just do not feel just a kind of sense of human relatability when it comes to that. So, like, and again, it's not, whenever a political figure is attacked or killed or something like that, with Charlie Kirk being an example, he was a political commentator. People who disagreed with him politically were, at this point, they kind of dehumanized him to the point where they were celebrating his death. And the same thing can happen on both sides of the aisle. There's, like, and it's usually not like a big public figure. A lot of times it's just like, you know, for example, if you look the other side of things, whereas the woman who got shot in her car recently, you can almost kind of see where people stand politically based on their interpretation of that event. A lot of times, again, people kind of play team sports in politics, and it results in people not being viewed as people. So I think it's a completely different phenomenon he is describing here. And to answer your question, Botoa, a while back, the Ellen historian and Natalie Hunter had a bit of a debate the other day. I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about, since they were talking about Mushoku Tensei and Re Zero, and, you know, a lot of interesting topics. So I figured, you know, might as well take a look at it, see if it's any good.
And I do think, like, I mean, I'm not in a I'm not saying we should ban any, you know, violence in, like, video games or violence in movies or anything like that. But I think this is something we should be aware of, right?
See, I kind of go the other one, more chaotic. I kind of go, yeah, we can just show it all, but only to adults, kids, you know.
Wait, what?
And I think we can show it all in fiction, but only to adults, not to kids.
You're lagging again.
Okay, hang on. I'll try and operate.
Okay, I do kind of see where you're coming from. Like, it can, but I don't think that's necessarily enough to conclude that it does. I think, again, there's so much nuance to this conversation where, again, a lot of these discussions, when we're talking about fiction, so much of it is case by case. And there's so many different reasons for showing different things in different works of fiction. Even if you're just looking at something like, you know, sexuality or unpleasant sexual things. Again, one work of fiction could be doing it for different reasons than the other. But also there's an argument like, you know, even if something could impact wider society in a negative way, is there a line we really can draw? I don't think there necessarily is. Like, not one, at least, that won't result in voices getting suppressed in an unfair manner. Like, yeah, ultimately, like, it's a difficult question because, you know, for example, if we look at an example of fictional work that did demonstrably cause harm, we could look at, like, Birth of the Nation from the 1920s, I think it was, which, you know, it was a completely fictional movie that ultimately resulted in a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, which is not a good thing. Those were historically not very nice people. I mean, from what I heard, nowadays they're basically they exist, but they're not really a power. They're from what I've heard, they're basically now just like a social club for racists who like to play dress up. So they're not actually doing anything bad nowadays for the most part. So I don't really care about them now, but back when they actually had power, they were doing a lot of bad things. So there are examples of fiction resulting in bad things societally. But at the same time, like, is there a line that can be drawn? A lot, or is it just a kind of something that has to be, you know, a necessary evil, essentially? Because again, I'm definitely on the anti-censorship side where I don't think we should be suppressing certain topics or depictions as long as nobody's actually getting hurt by the depiction itself.
I think we can show it to adults, but not to kids. Like, anything. You can show anything to adults. We can sort it out. But for children, I don't think, you know, they should be seeing a lot of the stuff they see now, you know. It's just...
I mean, I agree. Like, with the children are not being, or shouldn't be shown it, right?
Yeah, and as somebody who likes a lot of really dark, disturbing media, and where most of my media consumption is stuff that's not like something that kids should really be saying, is that yeah, it is an important thing where I do think one of the issues with the modern internet is that kids are able to see things that and engage in spaces they really shouldn't be allowed into, where, like, you know, there's the joke is like it's like a human rights violation that I can log on to Twitter and be at risk of seeing a 14-year-old's opinion. It's a meme, but it's also kind of true where, you know, that's why kind of MySpace is, if I know you're under 18, I'll kick your ass out. Not just for liability reasons, but because it's like, hey, this is a space I want to kind of cultivate for adults. So, and then I'll talk about things like, for example, Euphoria, where Euphoria, I think, is an excellent piece of writing. Well, the visual novel is. The adaptation is dog shit. But Euphoria is a great piece of writing. It explores a lot of topics that a less extreme piece of media couldn't sufficiently explore. But also, I completely understand that you need to be an adult to experience that. It can really cause problems if you're underage and see something like that. This is the kind of thing that... Ugh, my cat's being difficult. But yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, there needs to be a separation between adults and kids. I don't know how you would actually go about that without violating privacy. I know they're trying to do that throughout the world, but so far every solution is either use AI, which is not yet capable of actually doing that kind of thing, or dox yourself, which I don't think either of those are actually good solutions to the problem. But that, and the best I can really do is, if I know you're under 18, I can kick you out of my Discord server. That's about it. And even then, how effective is that really? Because I mean, I have people in my Discord, I don't know most of their ages, and the ones I do, it's because they told me, and they could be lying. But yeah, I wish there was an effective way to kind of segregate the kids and the adults, but I just don't think there really is a way to do that. So I guess I understand the things they're saying here, but also it's like, because I engage with a lot of stuff that should be for adults only. I would love it if I had zero risk of a kid ever finding my stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine with your
But adults,
your take on.
we can see anything. Like, we're not going to hurt each other by showing a movie where some people get killed or some people get raped or whatever. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
we
I
can
don't
watch
think
Game
it's
of Thrones,
directly
we can
going
watch
to
Breaking Bad,
contribute
we
to
can watch The
violence.
Sopranos. We don't get like fucked up by it.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I don't think it's
I-
directly making anyone more violent. I agree.
Yeah. So I think we're pretty much agreeing on everything, to be honest.
Yeah, I like my only the only thing I argue, right, especially on Twitter, but like no one listens, no one reads on Twitter, be like past like the first sentence, right?
That's fun though.
It's just
He's not
I
wrong
think
about
it's
that.
morally bad, but that's it. I have no take on any legalized. I don't want there to be legal censorship, right?
You think what is morally bad though?
So
What do you think is
specifically
morally
the
bad? Or
adult the adult framing of minors in anime in like a sexual way that has like no purpose besides just sexualizing, right? I know you're gonna say it's it's anime, it's not real kids, but I still think because it is a representation of real kids, because they act childlike, they have childlike features, stuff like that. It is like, honestly, if you're into that, I
See,
find it quite
think
weird and
I think
disturbing.
it's worse when you take it like further and go, oh, the author of this or anyone who's a fan of this is a paedophile. That to me is worse. Like you're
Yeah, and that is actually a problem with, again, the online framing of things, where they, again, will project a fictional piece of fiction, and then project the things that happen in that piece of fiction onto the creator and anybody who consumes the thing. So, for example, when I made my video on the Euphoria hentai, it's a negative review ultimately, but it's framed as because it's a terrible adaptation ultimately. And there's a bunch of comments on that video of like, oh, we should check your hard drives. Oh, you must be a danger to women, that kind of thing. Despite the fact that that's more women have viewed that video on my channel than any other video. Like that video is legitimately, the audience is legitimately like 40% women on that one. So I don't know. Women seem to like that particular topic, but yeah, so it's one of those things. It's like, I feel like I do explain myself pretty well when I talk about Euphoria, saying how, hey, it uses these really extreme themes, these really disturbing scenes, and like it's fucked up on purpose, and that lets you explore kind of the most raw and primal elements of the human psyche, where part of one of the core plot lines, and I'm going to try to say this without actually spoiling anything because it's very important. It's very important to the story, and I don't want to actually ruin it for anybody, but there's like the idea of having to get pushed to an extreme and to like a mental breaking point, and having that be something that needs to happen is like a core part of that story, and things just get more and more extreme to kind of facilitate that. And the effects it has on the psyche of the various characters is something that gets explored. I feel like I explained that side of things pretty well. I think I'm pretty clear about what I mean by that. And I mean, I'll even mention that the stuff they depict in the Euphoria visual novel are not things that I'm personally into. Like those, they actually do make me uncomfortable. And I think the point is that I'm made uncomfortable by them. That being said, people will hear, I like Euphoria, and then kind of immediately decide the kind of person I am. So I completely understand what Ellen Historian is saying here, and what Natalie is saying here. That is a real problem on the internet.
I mean,
messing up someone's reputation in real life.
The thing is, I agree. I don't know if they're fully there, but I think it's close. Like I do think it's like if you're into like lolis, like the sexualization of lolis in anime, it is close to being a pedo.
I will say that one thing that is a factor, because I've actually like I'm not a lolicon myself, but I've met them. I've been friendly with them. I've talked to them. They are a very interesting community. Like they are genuinely fascinating. I mean, and one thing is that one thing that really does not help them is the fact that they tend to be kind of insular in the sense that not that they don't let people engage with them. They're insular in the sense that they kind of assume that everything they say is going to stay in their bubble. So they will say things that are extraordinarily edgy. Like that they will like actually make like pedophilia jokes and things like that. And when things like that leave containment, it looks really bad because it's just an egregiously edgy joke where it's like, again, I have no problem with edgy jokes, dark humor, all that stuff. I'm perfectly fine with that. But I also kind of understand the basics of optics. And when a lolicon tweet leaves the target audience, the optics are always really bad because of the way they're sounding. So that is one factor of things. But when you actually look at who they are as people, I've noticed that a lot of lolicon communities, or at least the lolicons that I've spoken to, they really gatekeep the fuck out of actual pedophiles, where anybody who even kind of hints at that stuff is excluded, is shunned, and like I've known lolicons who've said that they've reported people to the police because they thought they were among kindred spirits. So that's actually another important factor, is they actually do really delineate between reality and fiction. So that is another important thing. And also, one thing I've heard is that a number of lolicons are actually victims of childhood abuse, and they use it as a coping mechanism. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but that is another factor. And from what I've heard, a lot of them kind of lean into depictions of what happened to them, but in a positive framing, and they find that it kind of helps them. So there are elements. I don't think it's the way he is describing it, but at the same time, I kind of understand why you would come to that conclusion if you haven't actually like engaged with these people in good faith, because they are an interesting bunch, and a lot of things you would have preconceptions about with them don't actually hold up when you actually get to know them.
I don't think it is. I think it's like a furry wouldn't fuck a dog, you know?
I mean, I don't honestly, I'm not knowledgeable about like furries in general.
Well, actually, that's actually an interesting comparison, because again, that's actually, it is true that most furries are not actually attracted to animals. There is a small subset of them who are, but again, they're kind of the outcasts of the furry community. So yeah, I kind of get where it's actually a pretty good comparison, all things considered. It's just that furry is less objectionable on its face than lolicon is. So people will find furries weird, but won't immediately have that visceral, like, no reaction to them. And that's another group where most furries are perfectly decent people. Like I've met furries before. I don't think I've had I don't think I have any like real negative interactions with them. So, and as I've mentioned in the past, I used to deliver pizzas, and one time I delivered to a furry convention, and that was one of my favorite deliveries because they were just so nice. They tipped really well and offered me alcohol, even though I had to say no because I was driving. Yeah. Well, what comes to furry, there's kind of from what I understand about furries, again, I'm not a furry, so I don't know this firsthand, but there's kind of a number of different factors that kind of lean into the fascination around furries. One of them being there is an attractive element. For some furries, it is a sex thing. For some, it's an identity thing, and for some, it's just they like the idea of the culture of the anthropomorphized animals, that kind of thing. It's just something that they find interesting and engaging. So, from what I understand, there's different reasons people are attracted to that culture, and they all kind of have an interesting blend together. Although I will say the degenerates in the furry community are like really degenerate. Like if you've ever seen the Internet Historian video about Rainforest. One thing he doesn't mention in that video, which I think is actually significant, is the reason that convention exploded so much, like the reason it went as badly as it did, was that that convention kind of didn't um, ban the people who were banned from all the other conventions, because those other conventions kind of know the problem causers and they exclude them. So it does seem like they also gatekeep their own as well. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible that it could be about their human elements too. I don't really know, because again, I'm not involved in the culture. I mean, from what I understand, it kind of emerged from like the early like cartoons and anthropomorphized like drawings and early animations, and that kind of furry kind of evolved from that. But yeah, I don't know.
But like,
I got some friends who are into the furry stuff.
yeah.
They wouldn't fuck an actual dog, but they like to maybe dress up as a dog. You know,
Isn't
I
it
don't fucking
like
know. It's their business. But like, I think the lolly thing is the same as that. Like they like the representation when it's in cartoon form, but they're not pedophiles.
yeah, but like what
You know, and
what is
so
like what
coming
makes
out
up
and saying that,
a stereotypical
coming out
or
and saying that they
yeah.
are is destructive. You know, that can ruin their whole lives.
I mean, yeah, I've never once called them like directly pedos or anything like that.
I think also another thing that is probably pretty important that I don't know if they're going to go. Excuse me. That I don't know if they're going to go into is that you can have different interests in the context of fantasy versus reality. Like, again, as somebody who engages a lot with sexual media, be it like eroge, visual novels, that kind of thing, and I found some just great pieces of media through that. I found that the stuff that I can be into in the context of fiction is stuff that I would not be okay with, even like in a tangentially related to reality sense. Like there's stuff that I've enjoyed in fictional contexts that I would be really uncomfortable even role playing in real life. Because actually, believe it or not, despite the fact that I kind of have this portrayal of myself online as a total degenerate who, just because of all the porn games I've played and reviewed and all that stuff, and how I have fun with all the wacky elements of things, I'm actually pretty vanilla IRL. But so like I can understand that, you know, being attracted to something fictionally is not comparable to necessarily saying you're 100% going to be attracted to the IRL equivalent. And I also do think that, at least in my case, the things that are more taboo, the fact that there's this separation, this element of them that is obviously fictional, makes it less weird for me. So I think a lot of lolicons and furries probably fall into that category as well, because that is something I've noticed about myself. And I think people who are just not into something that is taboo in a fictional context probably just can't relate to that mindset. Because, I mean, yeah, and sexuality is a complicated conversation. There's so much that feeds into it. So much that can kind of... There's a lot of nuance. I don't even understand a vast majority of it. So, yeah, it makes sense that if you can't relate to something sexually, it's going to be weird. Like, even something very basic. I cannot personally relate to people being bisexual. I think it actually makes more sense to me to be gay than to be bisexual, because I know that, you know, as a straight guy, I am attracted to women. The things that I am attracted to women for are the things that I am not attracted to men for. Like, the things about men that I don't like kind of inversely correlate with the things about women that I do like. So the idea of being into both is just kind of breaks my mind, because I can understand being into one or the other. I, of course, know that bisexual people are real, obviously, and I don't have anything against them. I just can't personally relate to that. So it's probably, when you get to the more weirder things, it's probably the same kind of deal.
Just said it's very weird and strange. I still will hold that opinion. This might just be like a very subjective and personal take from each person.
No, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, feet is another one. I don't understand feet. Like, I'm not repulsed by feet, but I also don't get the attraction to feet either. I mean, from what I understand, there's actually, like, reasons, like, psychologically why feet are a thing. Like, apparently the part of the brain that kind of gets activated when you see feet is kind of close to the sexual side of the brain, and that like wires can get crossed pretty easily, and that's why that's such a common fetish. But again, I'm not into it, so I don't really understand it. But you know what? As far as weird fetishes go, that's probably one of the least concerning. It's just fun to make fun of them. As a bi person, you can't always relate to being bi either. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
I just don't like someone calling my friends pedophiles, you know, like when I know they're not.
I mean,
But
yeah. But though,
don't-
like, but then again, Natalie, you're also like retweeting people who are calling me that, right? Like chibi reviews and
yeah,
that
I
is like
don't
very
really understand why they're calling you that. I don't know.
yeah. They
I was
have
retweeting them just to start beef, you know, because it was funny, but get more people on the stream. But
Yeah, that is one thing about Natalie is I think I like her. I think she's a decent person. She does kind of tend to jump onto things sometimes where she kind of, gets involved. I like with the Ellen Historian specifically. I think she kind of jumped into the drama without really being fully checked into it. And honestly, the fact that they talked as close to face as you can when you're on opposite sides of the world. And again, from what Natalie said, she actually enjoyed this conversation. She has a positive impression of him. I think that probably diffused a lot of the drama before it even started. But like, sometimes she can she doesn't start shit, but she can kind of like intensify it sometimes. Although I will say it's also just another thing where some people are a little bit more out there when they're on Twitter versus on YouTube. Like there's a number of content creators I know of who are just completely like, when they collect their thoughts and put it into a YouTube video, very like calm, collected, highly intelligent, all this stuff. When they get on Twitter, they become like total gremlins. I'm not quite on that. Like, I don't think Natalie's like that level, but there's a little bit, she cuts loose a little bit when she goes on Twitter.
I don't.
Yeah, that's a good way. She doesn't start the fire, but she does sometimes throw a little bit of fuel onto it. Even though I will say she's also just kind of, while she can be quick to start shit, or not start shit, but like to kind of feed into existing difficulties between people, she's also very quick to squash beef as well. Like I know she got into some arguments with another YouTuber. It was the otter guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but like they kind of went at each other for a little while, but then like over the course of like a couple hours, they became friends, which is really funny. I don't think it's a video call. I think he's probably just looking at his chat, I'll be honest.
I think you're a pedophile.
yeah. I
But
mean,
then I also don't think Chibi is, or Brandon, or any of them, you know.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't think they are, but I think they are weird. They are very Yeah, I'm just gonna
No,
leave
they're
it
not.
weird.
They're cool. They're cool guys.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, from the little I've seen of Chibi, I don't have anything against him personally. He does seem a little weird, though. I don't think necessarily being weird is a bad thing. I will say I'm weird. Like I'm weird as fuck. That's part of my appeal, I think. But yeah, I get it. I can understand why Chibi is off-putting to people, because he kind of has this high energy, like I'll fight you mentality.
You know,
I mean,
you might have gone down a
yeah.
better path and made friends with them, you know, but you didn't. You decided to rage bait and.
I mean, it wasn't really
take
rage bait.
argument.
All my takes on are pretty.
No, I mean it's fine.
yeah.
It's a route to getting popular, but I didn't do that. I made friends with people, and actually, some of the best friends I've met in my life have been through doing it that way. You know, doing it the good way, and you could like too.
I mean, I fundamentally disagree on them with. I disagree with them on like many things, even aside from anime.
Yeah. Well. Oh yeah. He does seem like, again, I haven't seen a lot of Chibi's stuff, but yeah, I can believe it. A lot of people are nowadays, especially a lot of people who kind of have the commentary, high intensity content style have gotten political lately, and that kind of annoys me. I don't really want to hear people. Essentially, if somebody has made a name for themselves talking about things that aren't politics, I don't want to hear their opinion on politics. Fundamentally, that's like one of the reasons I don't watch Nuxtaku anymore, because regardless of whether I agree with what he's saying or not, I don't care about his political opinions. I liked when he did actual anime analysis. I thought those were very good. Like, but political opinion, I don't really care about that. But yeah, So yeah, and again, I don't have any problem with him as a person. He seems like a decent guy, all things considered. But I just don't care about his political opinions. Again, I want to watch him talk about anime analysis and trolling streamers. Those are fun for me. Hearing the next guy talk about politics when I didn't follow him for politics is not something I'm interested in. Or if I am going to hear somebody talk about politics, I'd prefer to be like when I used to watch his podcast. He was something I would listen to in the car. I thought that was pretty good. He would sometimes give his opinions there. That's an appropriate venue for that, I think. So yeah, and I agree. He's an entertaining guy. He understands how to put on a show. He's a performer. Again, I just don't care about his political opinions. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe I get from Chibi. So then again, I've only seen like 1 or 2 of his videos.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, they all think you're a dickhead, and they've been begging me to make a video about you for like weeks. And I was just like, you know, it's nice to talk to you, probably. You know, I don't like to get into beef with people. It's stupid, but like,
Yeah.
I feel like,
I mean, like with me and
He
Chibi
wanted us-
specifically, like he blocked me first, and like, okay, I can tell you the situation. Do you know the Hassan dog situation?
Oh god. So I will say I've been a San hater for a long time. I think it was back when, I don't know if any of you are going to be aware of this, but my beef with not beef, because he doesn't know who I am. I don't really talk about him much. I just kind of been like a passive hater. Where ever since he had his drama with JXE, who's another YouTuber who I don't think he's made videos for a long time, which is a shame. Those videos were very good, but basically Hassan had watched a JXE video on his stream and just kind of got up partway through and let about a third of it run with, no commentary because he wasn't in the room. And they kind of had a back and forth about all that going on. And that from there, I thought Hassan made a real ass of himself in that whole back and forth. I thought he was like, wow, this guy just does not give a shit. So I've kind of been a hater of his since then. And seeing the dog situation kind of blow up and now everybody hates him has been very vindicating for me.
yeah.
Okay, so when it first happened, right? It was like the first 30 minutes of it happening. I put out a tweet saying people were overreacting, and I don't think he would actually do that. And then like 30 minutes later, I replied to my same tweet of that saying, never mind, Hassan is being very suspicious. But then what Chibi did was he quote retweeted and screenshotted like the top parts where I said people are overreacting and like called me a dog abuser or like a dog abuser defender. And then when I corrected him and like quote retweeted saying, no, you're lying, I like scroll under, I legit say, never mind, he is suspicious. And it was like less than half an hour between both those posts. He blocked me when I corrected him. So
yeah, that is cowardly behavior. I do not approve of that. Like, that's the thing. I don't necessarily have a problem with people kind of being a little provocative, being a little shit stirry, starting up drama. That's kind of how Twitter is. But at the same time, you got to be honest about it. Like, you really do have to. Again, like, I think there's a way. Like, okay, so I think the way I can put this is there are ways to present your opinions with varying levels of intensity. Like, if you understand, and this might just be because I'm, I have an interest in things like writing and fiction and all that stuff, so I understand how framing words can really change how it's received. Let's say, so, okay, so I'll give an example. So those of you will know who watch me on YouTube, who watch my YouTube streams, will sometimes have met my, one of my mod, ANCAP Gamer, who, as his name implies, is an anarcho-capitalist. So that's kind of an extreme subset of libertarianism. So I'm familiar with that political ideology. Without saying what I agree with or disagree with, that doesn't matter. But one of the common positions in the libertarian ideology is the idea of absolute freedom of association, where basically they said you should not be encouraged or penalized to engage or not engage with other people as you like. So one of the examples of that would be, I think you could, like when it comes to owning a business, one of the ideas of pure freedom of association is you shouldn't be forced to serve anybody you don't want to, even if you have a dumb reason for not wanting to serve that person. They basically said, hey, it's your business, it's your choice who you engage with. if people don't like it, they don't have to engage with your business. So, like example, years ago, if you remember the cake situation where a gay couple wanted to get a wedding cake baked for their wedding, and the owner was a religious person who was against that, and he said, you can buy a pre-existing a pre-made cake, but I won't cater one specifically for that because it's against my religion. Whole drama, doesn't matter. The libertarian position on that is generally that even if you don't agree with the refusal of service, he should be allowed to do that refusal of service. And I think that's an argument people, if you agree or disagree, presenting it like that is completely understandable. I think people can at least see where you're coming from if you present it like that. You can present the exact same opinion in a much more provocative way by saying, repeal the Civil Rights Act. That's ultimately saying the same thing, because the idea of the Civil Rights Act is you can't refuse service to somebody based on a protected status, which is technically not a freedom of association principle. However, presenting it like that is much more inflammatory. So that's kind of how you can engage with things online. If you know what you're doing, you can make yourself sound a lot more inflammatory than you really are. But you still have to be honest for me to respect it. And that's, again, if what Ellen Historian is saying is true, and I don't have any real reason to believe he's not being truthful, Chibi Reviews seems to have kind of taken what he said without including the full context and then blocked him when corrected. That, I think, is cowardly behavior. I don't support that in the slightest.
Yeah, like he, like from the get-go, just started lying on me.
You know, like
You're lying again.
he's a pro-dog person.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh,
yeah, it sounds like that was a bit strange situation. I can talk to him about it if you want, but like,
yeah, I
I think he's normally that, you know.
I just think he wanted an excuse to
people
block
just
me.
had their
Hello?
So yeah, and that's one of the things. People get really weird about blocking on Twitter, where I think if you want to block somebody, just block them. Personally, I don't really block people. The only people I actually block are actually like bots and phishing accounts. Like, you know, if somebody leaves if you get one of those bots under your replies where it's like, oh yeah, follow this person to solve your whatever problem. I don't want people, you know, having exposure to that. So I block those just so they can't spread their own scams on my posts. So that's why I block those. If it's just somebody I don't want to hear from, I'll mute them. So I have a number of accounts that I've muted. But I don't know. I don't really like blocking people. I think it's just, you know, it's something about it feels wrong to me, but also at the same time, I don't think you should get defensive about who you block and why. I think you can block whoever you want for any reason, especially nowadays, since blocking on Twitter no longer prevents them from seeing what you're saying. It just prevents them from interacting with you. I think that's perfectly fine. If Chibi was looking for an excuse to block Ellen Historian, he shouldn't need it. He should just block him and say, I blocked him because I wanted to. I think that's a perfectly valid reason.
I never block anyone. They're robot, aren't they?
Wait,
yeah, actually, and Alan, what you're saying about the getting traction after Charlie Kirk, I've seen that on multiple other channels as well. Like, it's actually an issue. I know a lot of creators, again, because it was a hot button issue. A lot of people feel very strongly about it, and that has unfortunately convinced a number of creators to go into a more political direction. I think, for example, another channel I like is Metatron. I think his history content is excellent. I really like it. That being said, I don't give a fuck about the recent stuff he's been putting out regarding political stuff or general commentary stuff. When he makes a history video, I'll watch it like right away. When he starts talking about other stuff, I'm like, oh, come on, I don't really care. This is not why I followed you. So, again, I think that is one of the annoying things about because you can, from doing political bait on either side of things, you can get a following that way, but it just kind of forces you to kind of almost betray the type of content you originally made your name on. And that is, again, one of the reasons I refuse to discuss my own political opinions on YouTube. If I talk about politics, it's in the context of a fictional work, or it is like the most milquetoast thing you could possibly say. And the fact that I know for a fact that I have people all over the political spectrum following me. I've talked to people who are like very far right. I've also talked to people who are like full on communists. I think it's great that both of those groups can enjoy my content, and that if you know my political opinions, it's because you guessed. I think that's pretty cool.
Probably blocks them.
Wait, can you do the trick again where it stops the
Some
lag?
people can already block-
Hello?
Sorry. Hang on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just turn it off and on.
Entire situation.
Okay,
Yeah, it works.
I wanted to skip it over.
Some people have claimed to me that you've blocked them.
Yeah, okay, so this entire situation blew up and people just like kept spamming pedo, like over and over again. And I'm just like, all right, at this point, if you're gonna start spamming this shit in like unrelated posts,
I don't think
just blocking
anyone
you.
thinks you're an actual pedo, apart from maybe one person has told me that, but like, I don't think anyone thinks you're a pedophile. It was more like that your takes on Mushoku Tensei were
I mean, you
objectionable
say that, but
to
like I got
the
numerous
fan base and-
death threats and dox threats from that. So like once that started happening and people were threatening my family, I just started blocking anyone who wasn't trying to engage
Right.
seriously.
But that happened to
Yeah,
Chibi as
and-
well, right? You have to appreciate that.
And one thing I will acknowledge is that people going completely gremlin on you is an unfortunate reality of the internet, where it is obviously not okay for people to threaten death on this guy or to threaten to dox him, anything like that. That is absolutely unacceptable, and what I'm about to say does not take away from that fact. But when you're on the internet, that's something that's going to happen. Everybody's received death threats at some point, unfortunately. It is the reality of things. Everybody's been called slurs. Everybody gets an insane person. I even briefly had somebody who had made multiple sock puppet accounts to try to harass me. However, I was actually kind of disappointed because I just kind of stopped engaging. I just kind of ignored him and muted the new accounts as I saw them. And he gave up after like 2 days. I'm like, come on, where's the fucking dedication? You're gonna be jumping on all of my tweets, talking shit about me, about a video I made like 5 years ago, but you're gonna give up after 2 days? Come on.
Happened to him as well.
Yeah, I understand. That's why whenever I can,
And that's because, let's not forget, I'm basically a nobody online. I have just pushing 7,000 subscribers on my main YouTube channel, and I have like 200 and something followers on Twitter. So again, I have no clout to my name. And even I have gotten these types of crazy people in my sphere. So it's just a reality of the internet. It shouldn't happen. It sucks. But also, like, you kind of have to just accept it and deal with it. And I don't like it when people use that as a shield. Which I don't think that's necessarily what he's doing. But he's clearly it's a sore spot with him, clearly.
like whenever I see anything like that about Chibi, I always put like underneath, I do not support like any of like these threats. This is not like cool whatsoever. Don't take just silly internet beef and like bring it to reality, stuff like that. I've always said that in any single situation is brought up. And I mean, you could probably scroll through my
To be
tweets.
honest, you seem like a pretty rational, nice person, but like, if I got a beef with you on the internet, we're gonna beef. It'll be funny. But you
Yeah, I
seem like
guess.
a nice, rational person. I just I don't agree with your opinions on Mushoku Tensei or ReZero, and they put me here to talk to you about it.
Yeah, one thing I will say, again, as somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about Ellen Historian, just seeing him talking to somebody again, not face to face, but like kind of face to face, he is a lot less inflammatory when actually talking to somebody than he is on Twitter, which I think is a common thing. Again, Twitter has, unless you pay Elon, Twitter has a 240 character limit. That's kind of, you're gonna have to extract nuance out of it in order to make your opinions known on Twitter because of that. So that's just the nature of Twitter. So, but yeah, he seems a lot more rational when he's actually talking. And I'm kind of in Natalie's camp at the moment where I disagree with a lot of what he's saying, but he seems like a decent guy, honestly.
I mean,
Yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
another thing. Like on the fact that they're calling his son a pedophile, that is like a terrible thing to say, something that can ruin his life. Over the fact that he has different
exactly.
takes about a series, so it is like very serious to take on the fact that it is wrong of them to try to accuse him of something like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, Frank should have your channel. Frank has better takes.
Which
Thank you.
wait,
Thank you, babe.
Rara?
But no, he does though. Everything I've
Yeah.
tried to say to you, he's said the same. But yeah,
Yeah, me,
Frank's my boy.
Rara, he found me
You fixing
like
it with
because
Frank.
our disagreement on Mushoku Tensei. That's how we became friends. Because he
Before I
and
met him,
him,
I used to hate him, bro.
dude, we argued so much when he first joined, and now we're
I'll
friends.
be honest, that's a thing that just seems to be such a commonality, especially on the internet. People just can't stand each other for a while, and then eventually they become like the best friends. Like honestly, even me, I've had that experience. Not online actually, but back in middle school, there was this one guy who we couldn't fucking stand each other. We were constantly butting heads. I don't even remember what changed, but in high school we were like really close. So I don't know. One point he shot me in the face with a BB gun, completely by accident, but it happened. And yeah, if you can survive that type of interaction, you're probably pretty cool with one another. So I don't know why that keeps happening, but it does seem to be a common human experience.
From the arguments about Mushoku Tensei. So,
Oh
Yeah.
well, I like him anyway.
well, that's cool.
He should team up with me instead. You know.
But yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I do think we agree on most things. It's just like the one moral
We do,
like
yeah.
difference
I
we
mean,
have.
like
So
we're not really arguing at all here. You know, I came on here because people wanted me to argue with you about various things, but
Yeah, and I do agree, Lay's Dreamer, where people tend to kind of cool down when they actually are open and engage with one another in good faith. Like I do think most people tend to agree on most things, and the things that they disagree on is not even the core elements they disagree on. It's kind of just the consequences of their beliefs. They view things in a different way, and I think it's completely. Again, I as much as the crazy drama can be fun, I don't know. I do wish more people were open to kind of being a little intellectual about things, which should not be surprising to people who've watched my videos, know that I do kind of this long form, going in depth analytical content. So of course I would want a more intellectual approach to things, but you know, that is just that's how that happens.
honestly, I actually agree with you. I just think you put out these like shorts that sort of slate our series and say it's wrong and it
Mhm.
shouldn't be allowed to be like that. That annoys me because I feel like you can write whatever you want when it's anime, when it's fiction.
I
Just
mean,
tell a story.
I never said he wasn't allowed, but I still do think he's weird. I'm gonna be honest. But
It's all right to
yeah,
say it's
yeah.
weird, but saying it's vile and making implications about the author and the people who like it is what I have a problem with.
I've never made implication with people who like it. Like if you look at all my tier list videos for just isekai in general, Mushoku always comes second, and
Yeah.
I always praise it like almost every
What's
other
first for
video.
you?
Well, another thing I've actually found interesting is it's not uncommon for people to with creatives, a lot of times I've seen some of them just have completely opposite personalities than what you'd expect. With the two prominent examples are like Junji Ito draws this like really fucked up body horror, has these really just like dark stories, amazing artist, but like it's one of those things that like it would traumatize a child, but he is like just like a goofy kind person in real life, whereas like Miyazaki, the Studio Ghibli guy, makes, again, he's basically the Walt Disney of Japan, and he has made just incredible, wholesome, heartwarming movies that like genuinely an amazing, like a creative genius, but he's a total asshole in real life. So it is interesting. So that's another element where I think it's even worse to project things onto the author, because sometimes, again, the stuff they write about is just not what is in their own heart.
What's first?
Well, if you're including non-Japanese isekai, it would be Lord of Mysteries,
Lord of Mysteries.
and then it would be
Yeah.
ReZero, then
I haven't read it
Mushoku.
yet, but I would like to, and I know you've made a lot of content about it,
Mhm.
so I'd like to watch it. But Lord of Mysteries, I haven't read it. I don't
I
have
don't
an
know it
opinion on
either.
that. For me, the trifecta is Mushoku Tensei, ReZero, and Konosuba.
I've only watched the anime for Konosuba, so
Yeah,
I
need
mean
to
I'm not
read.
the biggest fan of it. I used to like.
I will say I need to read the Konosuba books too. That's another thing that's on my list that I just haven't gotten around to yet.
like it more when I was little or like younger in middle school, but
It'll
not
make you
anymore.
laugh. Like whenever I'm feeling a bit down, I'll put Konosuba on again and just feel better. You know, it's just
Yeah.
funny. But for a
Mhm.
deep story, Mushoku Tensei and Re Zero. I also really like Overlord and Tanya.
Yeah, both are great as well. I like them both as
Have
well.
you read
Yeah.
those?
Oh, yeah. Tanya
Castle
the
of
Evil is
Elite,
fun.
I like Shield Hero. You know,
Um,
I read a lot of the novels.
I mean, I like all like for Classroom Elite. I dropped the novels pretty early. I did not like Classroom Elite that much.
I like the novels.
But
I didn't really like the anime of it, but I did like the novels.
I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
this one, so
I don't know.
can't say.
It's I like that kind of mystery thing though. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of what I like. That's what I like about ReZero. It's like there's so many mysteries waiting to be revealed. You know?
then I think you will really like Lord of the Mysteries.
Again, I do need to read the ReZero books because I mean I don't think it's even done yet, so I don't know if that's the good idea to do right now. But like it's, yeah, I don't know. I've heard good things about it, and I did like the anime, so it probably would make sense for me to read the books. And yeah, the only problem is with Rudius, which is okay in my opinion. You can dislike him as a character, and yeah, I generally agree. Yeah, projecting Rudy's behavior onto the author I don't think is a good thing to do. I also think that the Rudy's flaws are his entire point. Like again, I already went over this earlier on in the video, but like he doesn't seem to get why Rudy is the way that he is. And again, I think so much of it, everything I think kind of falls into place when you realize just how important Rudy's sexuality is to his overall story. I think so much of it makes sense when you take that into consideration. It's like that's the missing piece that everybody seems to not have.
Because it's all about
Well, yeah, I
mysteries.
mean it's in the name.
So
It's in the name.
yeah.
All right. Well, you can talk me through it then.
But yeah, I mean those are
You've actually got quite a lot of Riz.
Wait, what did you say?
I said you got quite a lot of Riz.
Riz, me?
But you could Riz. Yeah, you're
Oh my god, thank you.
producing me to read Lord of the Mysteries.
No, I mean I glaze it. I'm trying to like expand the cult for Lord of Mysteries. So more creators
No,
talking
you
about it
don't.
will benefit me because I'm
It's
like
in
the
the-
only
it's in the
person talking
title.
about it regularly. Yeah.
Honestly, I respect the hell out of that mindset. There are a number of things where I have made videos on it. I've talked about them, specifically trying to get people into them. Like one of the things I sometimes talk about is the visual novel Greener Pastures, which it's one of those ones where almost nobody feels like it's gonna actually give it a chance if they just happen to come across it. It's very, very tiny visual novel made by just a solo dev, I believe. And it's made with Koikatsu models, and it doesn't look very good. But it is so much better than it has any right to be. And I'm telling people, like, look, I know it looks like some kind of generic asset flip harem slop, but like, give it a chance. It's actually good, and it's actually really funny. Like, it managed to have a really goofy story while also having really serious character moments. Like, so I can completely understand his mindset of wanting to really glaze something just so people will experience it because not enough people have. So I'm like completely with him on that, even though I don't know about Lord of the Mysteries.
It's in the title though. Mysteries is what I like. One of my favorites is Made in Abyss because that's all mystery.
Yeah, Made in Abyss is
Like-
really good.
I've heard good things about
Yeah, but
Made
it's
in
like a
Abyss.
mystery box, but you know that there actually will be a proper reveal at the end, not like Lost or
I love how his chat's kind of coming up against him. His story has no riz, he says.
something.
When's season
else
3
we
coming
got
out
here
for
now?
Made in Abyss?
Who have we got here now?
Yeah, what do you say?
Hello, Lumi.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, we have another person I don't know.
Any other
I don't know.
drama we have? Or
No, I don't. I think we've resolved it all, really, haven't we?
I think we might have.
Yeah, this
I mean, just like a
confrontation
lot of your
was
friends.
Yeah, this confrontation was really anticlimactic, but like in a good way.
Like we just hate each other, I guess. Not like you, just like a lot of your friends, a lot of people who know you and the
Yeah, no,
group
a
you're
lot of
in,
my
so.
friends hate you.
So
This might have resolved it. I don't know. But I can't blame him. You know, like you did say some weird shit.
I mean,
like you did.
I think I've been pretty tame, honestly. I honestly don't. I haven't like insulted anyone on on
No, you haven't.
yeah.
You haven't really. But like the stuff you said about Mushoku Tensei, I think was what drove people to want me to fight you. You know.
I mean,
Same
are
thing for me,
which
bro.
I
No,
think
Frank
you're
gets
referring
it.
to
Frank has the right
videos.
opinion,
I
but
I think you're referring to
you
videos
could.
that are from like 2 years ago. So
Yeah, I mean, like, but I have videos from 2 years ago that explain why your videos from 2 years ago are wrong. So,
I mean, did any like I
Yeah,
don't think
and that is one of the downsides of YouTube in general, because the videos last for a long time. I mean, there are things I've said in older videos of mine that I don't necessarily agree with anymore, and my opinions and perspectives on things have changed and evolved over the years. So it is one of the things where sometimes just the difference between time can result in somebody responding to an old video of somebody's and basically arguing against points they no longer agree with, or that they did not express properly. Because that's another thing. Just over all the practice I've had, I've learned, I think, to express myself a lot more clearly than I used to. And I also am more aware of when I express something not so clearly. Because there are times when I've released videos, and then like a week later, I'm like, "Ugh, I wish I said that a little bit differently." I can see how that could be misinterpreted. So that is one of the downsides of the permanence of YouTube.
anything I really said
are you
which
just short
was
and shit now?
wrong as
Like
in
short
like
form?
correct like objectively in like the book. I just think you disagree with me on the like the way I presented it and just my take on the author and
Yeah, but
just
I
the
don't think
moral.
that you can take those takes back to the author. That's my point. Like, I think it's fine to criticize the character, but to think the author only did that way because he's a pervert or something, that to me is a bad take. You know?
I mean, I do think reading a certain like a series as long as Mushoku Tensei gives you like a little bit of insight on like how the author works. But I mean, you can disagree with me on this, but
He doesn't though,
yeah,
does he? Because you've had Old Dragon's Tale.
yeah,
There's nothing pervy in that, right? It's not
yeah.
the author's way. He just thinks that sex is a normal part of life, and he puts it in his stories. You know, and you took apart those aspects of his stories and made the impression that he and the people who liked the stories were pervert.
I will also just, I do have to acknowledge that I think part of it is that we need to remember that the main Mushoku Tensei series is from Rudy's perspective. Rudy's experiences and struggles with his own perspective on sexuality is just, that's core to his character arc. And of course, if we're seeing that from his perspective, sex is going to be a big part of Rudy's story and of the story from Rudy's perspective. So we're going to hear about it a lot. So that's, projecting that all the way onto Refugene himself. So when he does a story that's not about Rudy, so for example, Old Dragon's Tale is from the perspective of pre-split Laplace. Laplace doesn't really seem to have much of any sexual desire at all, so sex just isn't a part of that story.
For liking them.
I never
That
said
was what we
I
all.
never said anyone who likes Mushoku is a pervert because I like Mushoku. I'm not gonna call myself a pervert, right?
Well,
Doesn't even make
I mean, so I like Mushoku Tensei, and I'm a pervert, but I'm not a pervert because I like Mushoku Tensei.
sense. Makes sense, but
No,
like,
I need to perverts. But
yeah, I mean, like I don't know if how like strong this Old Dragon's Tale like argument is because yeah, he can write stuff doesn't have those aspects, but when it comes specifically to Rudy, I feel like he like again, I just don't think he was really that punished or like there wasn't much like, it didn't really address his like pervert his like
I just
lust
didn't
for
think he needed to be punished. You know, like I just didn't think. I thought that the response that happened in the story was right for the situations.
okay,
Like we were
maybe not
talking
even
about
punished.
earlier.
I just think it wasn't
Like,
as explored as it should have been because I think that's like that part was the worst part of what is it Rudy's character, right? But Rudy's grew in it just his that and also his like just attraction to little girls.
For me,
I mean, I think one of the reasons it's not super in-depth explored is because, again, what the issue is that Rudy is the narrator of the story. Everything is from his perspective, and part of one of the things I like about Mushoku Tensei is that Rudy is somewhat of an unreliable narrator, where he gets the facts right, but he comes to the wrong conclusions sometimes, and he has a warped perception of sex and of himself. So a lot of times the way he presents himself is not necessarily true to reality. And so I think one of the reasons that the whole development of his sexual side is not explored super in depth is because I don't think Rudy consciously understands it himself. So he can't really tell us about it if he is not aware of it. And that's, a lot of what, especially it's more prevalent in early Mushoku Tensei because Rudy is so much of a gremlin in the early parts of the story, where a lot of times what's kind of presented in the story, the message that the audience receives comes from what Rudy doesn't say, or the dissonance between what Rudy says and what the audience knows. Like for the classic example is in the first page of the first book. What the hell had I even done wrong? All I did was skip out on our parents' funeral so I could spank it to uncensored lolly porn. The whole point of that is that that's such an outrageous thing for Rudy to say, but he genuinely doesn't understand why it was so bad for him to skip his parents' funeral for something as asinine as masturbation. He just genuinely does not understand it. So he presents it as, yeah, obviously we weren't close. Why would I go to their funeral? When the audience sees that and they understand the disconnect. So that's a really key moment. And I think that you can extrapolate that whole thing into why a lot of the things like Rudy's attraction to children or Rudy's kind of general perspective on sex, he heals from that, he improves in that regard, but I don't necessarily think he's consciously aware of the details of how he is improving and how he is healing. So that's why they don't actually go into specifics about it, because Rudy himself doesn't understand it.
So
For me, it just feels like
No,
it
I
was
think-
addressed, and like,
I think he-
you already said.
You can go.
No, sorry, speak.
Okay, like I agree with you on some point that I do feel that it's some parts I feel like there should have been more like addressing for Rudy's like flaws and change. But I think that the story doesn't really need it wouldn't really make the story better or worse if it doesn't have that. That's like obviously it would be nice, but for me it felt like the story handles progression very well. With the I think the stuff he has a whole ED arc which represents his loss in masculinity and loss in a physical
Yeah.
way to control his body.
I disagree with that interpretation. I don't think that story, the ED arc, was about Rudy's masculinity or anything like that. I think it was much more of an emotional thing where when he loses his virginity to Eris, that is essentially a physical representation of him being completely open and vulnerable with somebody else for the first time ever in 40 some in let's see, so it was 20 years of 34 years in his past life plus another 13, so almost 50 years of existence. This is the first time he's really opened himself up to another person and really let himself be fully completely vulnerable with them. And as much as he is a horny motherfucker, actual sex, sharing that experience with somebody is something he has never experienced. And it is something that is very important to him, clearly. So he opens himself up to Eris, and then she leaves the next day. And due to a miscommunication, he believes that it's his fault. He thinks she left because I'm not good enough. And so essentially, when he opens himself up and becomes vulnerable, the worst thing happens in that he's hurt in that moment of vulnerability. And then because he has that connection with it, happened after the moment of him being vulnerable was sex. Now he has this negative association with sex, and to him, sex and vulnerability means he's going to get hurt. So his body completely rejects the idea of being sexual, and he just has this psychological block on him. So I don't think it's a masculinity thing. I think it's an emotional vulnerability and the idea of being willing to accept people into yourself and be like open with somebody and being vulnerable, accepting that you might get hurt and being scared of being hurt. That I think is what the whole ED arc was about. So I completely disagree with that interpretation of things.
So I feel like that shows how he feels disconnected with his new body. Now he feels like he's back in his old one, doing that whole arc, as he feels like he can't control himself, as he feels disgusted with his body like he did in his past life. And I feel like the way we see him grow out of that and try to, instead of going for like lust to satisfy his to fix his issue with his ED, just when he goes to the prostitute, he instead fixes it with love and tries to have a healthy relationship with someone, and that is the fix to a solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that the loving relationship with Sylphie was the thing that fixed him. And again, he went to the prostitute to try to fix the situation, but the issue is ultimately not a physical one, it's an emotional one, where again, it's because he has these negative associations with sex and how he, his first and last real sexual encounter resulted in a significant amount of emotional pain. That, the thing is, sleeping with somebody in a loving way and having her not wake up next to him was what fucked him up. So sleeping with somebody who loves him and then wakes up next to him and doesn't leave him, who he shows his emotional side and is treated with care and tenderness, that is what he needed to realize, hey, sometimes being vulnerable is not always going to be a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a very fulfilling thing. Being open to being hurt doesn't mean I will be hurt. That is what fixed it. And then he no longer had that intrinsically negative association with sex. And that is what ultimately cured his ED. So yeah, it's again, I kind of disagree with this guy's core interpretation of things, but like I kind of, that my interpretation kind of leads me to this other conclusion for things, because, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
And I will say, if Sylphie had left for whatever reason, that probably would have broken him beyond repair.
I
I-
agree with him. That was
yeah, but
exactly what I
this
think
isn't
about it.
specifically about like the pedophile shit. This is like a step away. Like this isn't specifically address the
Uh-huh.
the issue of the age, right? And him
No,
like coming
I
to
see,
terms
but
and
I think it's all
that
connected.
stuff being explored. Like yeah, he has
I mean,
issues with his
I'm from
love,
somewhere
right?
where the age of consent is 16. I don't really give a fuck if someone's 15. Everyone fucks everyone else when they're 15. Who cares, right?
I mean, I guess.
Sorry, that's just what it's like.
I mean,
in
wouldn't like you don't
most of the
find it
world.
weird if it's like a 15-year-old and a 50-year-old?
Talk about someone like they're a literal child when they're 15. We don't have that in Europe or Asia or
I mean,
anywhere
wait,
else.
Natalie, would it not be weird though if it's like a 15-year-old and like a 40-year-old?
Yeah, that would be weird. But a 15-year-old and another 15-year-old is normal.
Yeah, but in
Like
this
we're not
situation,
treated like children in the same way.
like
Okay.
Rudius is not.
So I'm going to say, I think I'm going to call this particular one here. I don't feel like they're really getting onto any new topics at the moment. And they're just kind of just continuing the conversation, which again, it's fine. They're just talking. They're two people allowed to have a conversation. But I don't feel like they're really touching on any new things here. But I think I got like all I really wanted to get out of this conversation, at least as far as the stream goes. I may end up watching the rest of it on my own just out of curiosity, but I don't think I have a whole lot more to add at this point. So I wouldn't feel right just continuing to watch it on stream, and especially it's already went a little longer than I wanted it to. But yeah, so that's going to be where I call this particular video for today. For those watching on stream, once again, I will link to the VOD. And those watching on the highlights channel, I will be linking to both Ellen Historian's Twitch channel and Natalie Hunter's YouTube channel. Those were the two people who were the primary people talking in this video. So please do go support them. We do always appreciate the original creators, even if it's a little bit different today. So yeah, and those watching on the highlights channel, thanks a lot for stopping by, and I'll see you in a couple days with a new video.